The dust never settled in Clemson's Ridge. It hung in the air like judgment, thick and yellowing in the late afternoon sun, coating everything. The wooden platform, the anxious faces of waiting women, the rough-hewn posts that marked the town's pathetic excuse for a selection square. Evelyn Hart stood at the far end of the line, her calloused hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She'd positioned herself there deliberately. Last in line meant last to be humiliated. Last to hear the silence that followed when a man's eyes skipped right over you like you were part of the scenery. 31 years old. In 1867, that made her a relic. She watched the other women arrange their skirts, pinch their cheeks for color, practice demure smiles that promised everything and demanded nothing. Most were barely 20, fresh-faced, hopeful. The kind of hopeful that only comes from not knowing any better. Evelyn had known better for a long time. Think anyone will take her this time? The whisper carried from somewhere behind her, meant to be heard. 7th try, isn't it? Lord, that's just sad. My husband says she's got a reputation. Too stubborn, too mannish. What kind of man wants a wife who argues? Evelyn didn't turn around. She'd learned that too. Responding only proved you'd heard, and proving you'd heard gave them exactly what they wanted. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed on the horizon, where the mountains cut sharp teeth into the sky. Freedom lived somewhere past those peaks, or oblivion. At this point, she wasn't particular about which. The selection platform stood at the center of town, such as it was. Clemson's Ridge barely qualified as a town, more like a collection of desperate people who'd run out of places to run. The general store doubled as the post office. The saloon doubled as the church on Sundays, though they swapped out the whiskey bottles for hymn books and pretended that made it holy. And the platform, built from lumber that had already started to warp, served one purpose: matching frontiermen with the women brave or broken enough to answer their advertisements. Mail-order brides. That's what people called them, though Evelyn hated the term, made them sound like furniture. Ordered, delivered, discarded when they didn't fit. She'd answered 7 advertisements, traveled to 7 different towns across Colorado territory, met 7 different men who'd taken one look at her and decided to keep shopping. Too old, too plain, too tall, too weathered, too opinionated, too much work for not enough reward. The first rejection had crushed her. The second made her angry. By the 5th, she'd gone numb. Now, standing here for the 7th time, she felt something worse than numb. She felt erased, like she was slowly being rubbed out of existence, one disappointed glance at a time. Ladies. Mr. Thornton, who ran the general store and fancied himself the town's unofficial mayor, stepped onto the platform. His vest buttons strained against his belly, and sweat darkened his collar despite the cooling afternoon. Gentlemen will begin arriving shortly. Remember, modest behavior, pleasant demeanors, and for heaven's sake, smile. Nobody wants a sour-faced wife. Several women giggled nervously. Evelyn remained perfectly still. She'd worn her best dress, though best was a generous description. Gray cotton, practical cut, mended in 3 places where the fabric had worn thin. No lace, no ribbons, no illusions. Her dark hair, more brown than anything memorable, was pulled back in a simple knot. No curls framing her face, no carefully arranged tendrils. She'd tried that nonsense twice. It hadn't helped. The first wagon appeared on the eastern road, trailing its own cloud of dust. Then another, then 3 more. Evelyn counted 6 wagons total, which meant 6 men, which meant 6 potential selections. There were 14 women on the platform. The arithmetic wasn't encouraging. "Oh, he's handsome, us," one of the younger women gasped as the first man climbed down from his wagon. He was handsome, blonde, broad-shouldered, probably 30. His eyes swept the line with the practiced assessment of someone evaluating livestock. He walked straight to a tiny redhead in the front row, barely 18 if Evelyn had to guess. "You'll do," he said, not unkindly. "Got a strong back?" "Yes, sir," the girl stammered. "Good. I need help with the farm. You can read?" "A little." "That'll work. Come on." He gestured toward his wagon, just like that, chosen. The girl's face lit up with relief so profound it was painful to witness. She gathered her single carpet bag and followed him, nearly tripping in her eagerness. 1 down, 13 to go. The next man took longer, asking questions, examining teeth like he was buying a horse. He finally selected a quiet brunette who looked terrified but grateful. The third man chose twins. Apparently he needed help running a boarding house and didn't care which sister was which as long as they could cook. By the time the fifth man made his selection, only 4 women remained. Evelyn and 3 others who, like her, had accumulated the particular kind of desperation that came from running out of options. The sixth man was older, probably 50, with kind eyes and gentle hands that suggested he'd buried at least one wife already. He walked slowly down the line, studying each remaining woman with genuine consideration. When he reached Evelyn, he stopped. Her heart, traitor that it was, jumped. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "How old are you?" 31. He nodded slowly. "You've been doing this a while, haven't you? The selection circuit?" There was no judgment in his voice, just observation. Evelyn appreciated that. "Yes." "Why hasn't anyone chosen you?" It was the most direct question anyone had ever asked. Most men just moved on without explanation. Evelyn considered lying, softening it, but what was the point? "I'm told I'm too old, too plain, too opinionated for a proper wife." "Are you? Opinionated?" "Depends on the opinion." A smile ghosted across his weathered face. "Fair enough." He glanced back at the other 3 women, then returned his attention to Evelyn. "I'm looking for someone to help with my daughter. She's 12, and she's difficult. Lost her mother 2 years back and hasn't been right since. Needs a firm hand but a kind heart. You got children of your own?" "No." "Ever worked with them?" "I taught school for 3 years in Missouri. Before." "Before?" "Before the school board decided a woman my age without a husband wasn't suitable for molding young minds." He nodded again, processing. For a moment, one fragile, foolish moment, Evelyn let herself imagine it. A daughter to raise, a home to maintain, purpose. Then he sighed. "I appreciate your honesty, ma'am. I do. But I think someone younger might be better suited. My Sarah needs a mother who can keep up with her for the long haul. I'm sorry." He moved to the youngest of the remaining women, a frightened-looking girl who couldn't have been more than 19, and made his offer. She accepted immediately. And just like that, Evelyn was alone on the platform. Again. Mr. Thornton approached, his expression uncomfortable. "Miss Hart, it's fine." She cut him off, not because she was angry, but because she couldn't bear to hear whatever platitude he'd prepared. "Same arrangement as before?" "Well, yes, but I'll stay the night at the boarding house. Catch the morning stage to Silver Creek. There's a selection there next week." "Actually, Miss Hart, about that." Thornton shifted his weight. "Mrs. Carmichael at the boarding house asked me to mention, well, you've stayed there 6 times now, and you haven't yet been selected, and she's concerned about the optics. The optics. Of housing a woman who's been rejected so many times. She worries it might give her establishment a certain reputation." The words settled over Evelyn like dust. She understood perfectly. Her failure was contagious. Her presence tainted whatever space she occupied. "I see." Her voice came out steady, which was its own small miracle. "Is there another boarding house?" "Not in Clemson's Ridge, no, but there's a decent camping spot about a mile west of town near the creek. Some of the men use it when they can't afford better. Yes, I understand." Thornton had the decency to look ashamed. "I'm sorry, Miss Hart. Truly." She nodded once, sharply, and stepped down from the platform. Her carpet bag, which contained everything she owned in the world, sat where she'd left it by the post. She picked it up. 30 pounds of failure in worn leather. The sun was dropping toward the mountains now, painting everything in shades of amber and regret. Evelyn started walking west, toward the creek, toward another night sleeping rough, toward another morning of choosing which town to try next, which advertisement to answer, which man might possibly overlook her accumulated flaws long enough to offer her something resembling a future. She'd made it maybe 50 yards when she heard it. Thunder. But the sky was clear, sharp blue fading to purple. Not a cloud anywhere. Evelyn turned, confused, and then she saw it. A rider. Coming fast from the north, pushing his horse hard enough to shake the ground. As he got closer, details emerged. Black horse. Black coat billowing behind him, dark hair, broad shoulders that suggested size even from a distance. He rode like someone who'd been born in a saddle, like the horse was just an extension of his own body. The few remaining people in the square stopped to watch. Whoever this was, he commanded attention. He pulled up hard in front of the platform, his horse sliding to a stop in a spray of dirt. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, and Evelyn got her first clear look at him. Tall, maybe 6'3", built like someone who'd spent his life doing hard labor, heavy through the shoulders and chest, narrow at the waist, long-legged. His face was all hard angles, sharp jaw, prominent cheekbones, a nose that had been broken at least once, dark eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and remembered all of it. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against sun-darkened skin. He was somewhere in his late 30s, maybe 40, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from years lived outside. Everything about him said danger. Not cruelty, something else, like standing near a coiled spring or a loaded gun. Controlled power that could snap loose at any moment. "I'm looking for Thornton," he said. His voice matched the rest of him, deep, rough-edged, the kind of voice that didn't have to raise itself to be heard. "That's me." Thornton hurried forward, suddenly obsequious in a way he'd never been with any of the other men. "Mr. Rourke, we weren't expecting you, sir. If I'd known you were coming, I would have ensured. I sent word 3 weeks ago." "Yes, well, the post out here can be unreliable. And is the selection over?" Rourke's eyes swept the square, taking inventory. "Just finished, I'm afraid. All the women have been chosen except—" Thornton hesitated, glancing toward Evelyn, who stood frozen by the edge of the square. Rourke followed his gaze. His dark eyes locked on her for exactly 3 seconds. Then he looked back at Thornton. "Except, well, Miss Hart is still available, but I should mention she's been through the selection process several times now without success, and she's a bit older than most men prefer, and—" "How old?" 31. Something flickered across Rourke's face. Not disgust, not disappointment. Something closer to interest? "She healthy?" "As far as I know, yes, but she able to work?" "I suppose, though I couldn't speak to her domestic skills, and several men have found her manner to be somewhat—" "I'm not asking about her manner." Rourke cut him off with the ease of someone accustomed to ending conversations. "I'm asking if she can work. Hard work. Ranch work." Thornton blinked. I don't know." "Miss Hart?" He called across the square. "Could you come here, please?" Evelyn's feet moved before her brain caught up. She walked toward them, her carpetbag still in hand, very aware of how she must look. Dusty, tired, rejected. Again. Up close, Rourke was even more imposing. Not just his size, though he was easily a head taller than her, but his presence. He occupied space in a way that made everything else seem smaller. His coat was expensive but worn. His boots were good quality but scuffed. His hands, when he pulled off his riding gloves, were scarred and calloused, working hands. "Miss Hart," Thornton began. "This is Mr. Caleb Rourke. He owns the—" "I know who he is." Everyone in the territory knew who Caleb Rourke was. The Rourke Ranch was the largest in 3 counties, maybe the largest in Colorado Territory. Thousands of acres, hundreds of cattle, dozens of employees, more wealth and power than most small towns could claim. Rourke's eyebrow, the one with the scar, lifted slightly. "Do you—" It wasn't a question. Evelyn met his eyes, refusing to look away even though everything in her wanted to. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Rourke." "I imagine it does. What have you heard?" "That you're fair but ruthless. That you built your ranch from nothing through hard work and harder decisions. That you don't suffer fools or laziness. That you've been widowed twice." She paused. "That the last woman who tried to marry you for your money disappeared under mysterious circumstances." Someone gasped. Thornton made a strangled noise. Evelyn realized, with a distant kind of horror, that she'd just said that last part out loud. But Rourke's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Close, though. "She didn't disappear. I put her on a stage to San Francisco with enough money to start over and explicit instructions never to return. Not mysterious, just permanent." His eyes hadn't left hers. "You always this direct?" Only when I've got nothing left to lose. And you've got nothing left to lose? I'm standing here alone on this platform for the 7th time. What do you think? I think, Rourke said slowly, that you just answered my question about whether you can speak your mind. He turned to Thornton. Give us a minute. Thornton scurried away like he'd been released from a trap. Evelyn and Rourke stood there, sizing each other up. The sun had dropped low enough now that everything was painted in shades of orange and shadow. I'll be direct too, Rourke said finally. I need a wife. Not for romance. Not for companionship. Not for decoration. I need a partner who can help run my ranch. Do you know what that means? I can guess. Guess. Evelyn took a breath. It means managing a household with probably 30 or more men passing through. It means cooking, cleaning, organizing, and budgeting for an operation that size. It means handling correspondence, record keeping, maybe even payroll. It means early mornings and late nights. It means isolation. I doubt you're close to any town. It means being the only woman in a sea of hard men who won't respect me just because you put a ring on my finger. It means proving myself every single day or being eaten alive. Rourke studied her for a long moment. You left out the hardest part. Which is? Dealing with me. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the humiliation, the bone-deep weariness, Evelyn almost laughed. I assumed that was implied. Most women, Rourke said, want a husband who'll cherish them, protect them, put them on a pedestal. I'm not that man. I don't have time for pedestals. I need someone who can stand on her own 2 feet in a windstorm and not break. I need someone who won't crumble the first time things get hard, or the first time I'm short with her because I've been up for 36 hours dealing with a crisis, or the first time one of my men says something crude and I'm not there to defend her honor. I need someone tough. Are you tough, Miss Hart? I'm still standing, aren't I? That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Evelyn shifted her carpet bag to her other hand. Mr. Rourke, I appreciate the consideration, but let's be honest. You rode in here looking for the selection, and all that's left is me. The woman nobody else wanted. The one who's too old, too plain, too difficult. You're not here because you chose me. You're here because I'm what's available, and I've had enough of being chosen by default. She started to turn away, but his voice stopped her. You're wrong. Evelyn looked back. Rourke stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I didn't ride in here looking for the selection. I rode in here looking for you. That's not possible. You didn't know I existed. Thornton sent a list, names, ages, basic information about each woman who'd be here today. I read it 3 weeks ago. I was supposed to arrive this morning, but I had a situation with rustlers that took longer to resolve than expected. I rode straight through to get here before you left. Evelyn's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. Why? Because every other woman on that list was between 17 and 23. Fresh. Young. Probably expecting romance and gentle handling. I don't have time to raise a child bride who'll cry when ranch life gets hard. You're 31. You've been rejected 7 times. You've answered 7 advertisements, traveled to 7 towns, faced 7 different humiliations, and you're still here, still trying. That's not desperation, Miss Hart. That's endurance. That's exactly what I need. You need someone who's been beaten down enough times that she'll accept anything. I need someone who's been beaten down enough times that she knows how to get back up. The words hung between them, weighted with truth. Evelyn felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope, exactly. Hope was too fragile. This was something harder. Recognition, maybe. Of being seen clearly, without filters or flattery. I'm not offering you an easy life, Rourke continued. The ranch is 3 days' ride from the nearest real town. You'll be isolated. You'll work harder than you've ever worked. My men are rough, and they won't take kindly to a woman trying to manage them until you prove you can. Some of them will test you. Some will resent you. And I can't always be there to smooth things over because I've got 10,000 other things demanding my attention. You'll have to handle it yourself. Can you do that? I don't know, Evelyn said honestly, but I'm tired of pretending I'm something I'm not just to make myself acceptable. If you want someone who'll smile and nod and never question your decisions, you're looking at the wrong woman. If I wanted that, Rourke said, I'd have hired a housekeeper, not looked for a wife. Then what exactly are you looking for? He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its hard edge. I built that ranch from nothing, worked myself half to death for 15 years to turn raw land into something valuable, and now it's too big for one person to manage alone. I need a partner, someone who can handle the things I can't because I'm spread too thin, someone smart enough to make good decisions when I'm not there, someone strong enough to stand up to me when I'm wrong. That's not romance, Miss Hart. That's business. But it's honest business, and I'll treat you with respect and fairness if you do the same. And if it doesn't work out, if I get there and realize I can't handle it, or you realize I'm not what you need, then we dissolve the arrangement. I'll pay your passage to wherever you want to go and enough money to start over. You have my word on that. Your word? It's all I have to offer. Take it or leave it. Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, past the intimidating size and the hard expression and the reputation for ruthlessness. She tried to see what was underneath. What she found was exhaustion. Not physical tiredness, though there was that too in the shadows under his eyes, but the deeper kind of worn down that came from carrying too much for too long. He needed help, real help, and he was practical enough to recognize it. She looked down at her carpet bag, everything she owned, 31 years reduced to 30 pounds. She thought about the boarding house that wouldn't have her, the camping spot by the creek, another selection in another town, another round of being examined and found wanting, and she thought about what he'd said. You're still here, still trying. That's not desperation, that's endurance. Maybe it was. I have conditions, Evelyn heard herself say. Rourke's expression didn't change. Name them. I need time, a proper courtship period before any marriage. At least 2 months to see if this arrangement could actually work. Reasonable? What else? I keep my own money. Whatever wages you'd pay a housekeeper, I get the same. Separate account. Fine. And if I say it's not working, if I decide to leave, you don't try to stop me. No arguments, no persuasion. You keep your word about the passage and the money, and you let me go. Agreed. He paused. My condition. You give it an honest try. Don't walk away the first time it gets hard or the first time you're uncomfortable. 2 months, like you said. If after 2 months you still want to leave, I won't stop you. Deal. They stood there in the fading light, two people who'd just agreed to something that wasn't quite a business arrangement and wasn't quite a marriage proposal. Something in between. Something undefined. Rourke held out his hand. We'll start tomorrow. I've got a room at the saloon for tonight. You can stay. I'll camp by the creek. Evelyn shook his hand. His palm was rough, his grip firm but not crushing. I'm used to it. That's ridiculous. I'll pay for a room at the boarding house. Mrs. Carmichael won't have me. I'm bad for her reputation. Something dangerous flashed across Rourke's face. Is that so? It's fine, really. I've camped before. It's not fine. He released her hand and turned toward the boarding house with the stride of someone who'd just identified a problem that needed solving. Wait here. Mr. Rourke, you don't have to... But he was already walking away. Evelyn watched him cross the square and disappear into the boarding house. She heard raised voices, his deep rumble, a woman's shrill protest, then silence, then footsteps. Rourke emerged 2 minutes later. Room 4, second floor, paid for the night plus breakfast. Mrs. Carmichael sends her apologies for the misunderstanding. Evelyn stared at him. What did you say to her? That I'd be very disappointed if my future wife wasn't treated with proper respect, and that my disappointment tends to be expensive for the people who cause it. Also that the Rourke Ranch does a significant amount of business in this town, and I'd hate to have to take that business elsewhere. You threatened her. I incentivized her. There's a difference. He picked up her carpet bag before she could protest. Come on. I'll walk you over. I can carry my own bag. I know you can, but I'm carrying it anyway. He started toward the boarding house. After a moment, Evelyn followed. Mrs. Carmichael met them at the door, her smile brittle and her eyes cold. Miss Hart, so lovely to have you. Your room is all ready. Thank you, Evelyn said, because what else was there to say? Rourke set her bag inside the doorway. I'll be back at dawn. We'll leave early to beat the heat. 3 days' ride, you said? Give or take. Depends on weather and whether we run into trouble. What kind of trouble? The kind that lives in the frontier. Animals, bandits, weather, bad luck. The usual. He tipped his hat. Get some rest, Miss Hart. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He left before she could respond, striding back toward the saloon with the same decisive energy he'd brought to everything else. Evelyn watched him go, then looked up at the boarding house that had rejected her an hour ago and was now welcoming her with false warmth. She'd made a deal with a stranger, agreed to ride 3 days into isolation with a man she'd known for less than an hour, committed to trying to make a life in a place she'd never seen, doing work she'd never done, for someone who'd chosen her not in spite of her flaws, but because of them. It was possibly the most reckless thing she'd ever done, or possibly the smartest. Time would tell which. Evelyn picked up her carpet bag and walked inside. Morning came too early and too bright. Evelyn woke to sun streaming through the thin curtains of room 4, her body stiff from a night spent on a mattress that was somehow both lumpy and hard. She'd barely slept. Every time she started to drift off, her mind jerked her awake with another question. What if this was a mistake? What if Rourke was lying? What if she got to the ranch and it was worse than anything she'd imagined? What if it wasn't? That question scared her most of all. She dressed in her traveling clothes, dark brown skirt, practical blouse, sturdy boots that had carried her across too many miles. She'd brought a hat to protect her face from the sun, though she'd long since given up on preserving her complexion. Her skin was already too weathered, too tanned, another mark against her in the catalog of feminine failures. Mrs. Carmichael had breakfast waiting downstairs, eggs, bacon, bread still warm from the oven. The woman's smile was marginally more genuine this morning, probably because Rourke's money had bought Evelyn a temporary exemption from contempt. Traveling with Mr. Rourke today, I hear, Mrs. Carmichael said, refilling Evelyn's coffee. Yes. You're a brave woman, or a foolish one. I haven't decided which. Evelyn took a bite of eggs. Does it matter? I suppose not. Either way, you'll find out what you've gotten yourself into soon enough. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. If you're smart, you'll be on your best behavior. Men like Caleb Rourke don't stay interested in difficult women for long. Good thing I'm not trying to keep him interested, then. Mrs. Carmichael pulled back, her expression somewhere between confused and disapproving. Before she could respond, the door opened and Rourke walked in. He looked like he'd actually slept, which Evelyn found vaguely annoying. His dark hair was still damp. He'd washed. His coat was different from yesterday, less dusty. He carried himself with the same controlled power, but this morning there was something almost energetic about him, like he was looking forward to the journey. Miss Hart, you ready? Evelyn drained her coffee and stood. As I'll ever be. Wagon's outside, loaded your bag already. You didn't have to. I was loading mine anyway, saved time. He nodded to Mrs. Carmichael. Thank you for the hospitality. The word hospitality carried just enough edge to remind her exactly why she'd been hospitable. Mrs. Carmichael's smile tightened. Of course, Mr. Rourke, any time. Outside, a wagon waited, sturdy, practical, built for rough terrain. 2 horses were hitched to it, both looking fresh and well-fed. Rourke's black stallion was tied to the back. He offered Evelyn his hand to help her up onto the seat. She took it, his palm warm and rough against hers, and climbed aboard. Rourke settled beside her, taking up the reins. 3 days, he said. Maybe 2.5 if we push. You ever traveled rough before? More than you'd think. Good. We'll camp at night. I've got supplies. You comfortable with firearms? I can shoot. How well? Well enough. He glanced at her, something like approval in his expression. We'll see about that later. For now, just sit tight and tell me if you need to stop. He snapped the reins, and the wagon lurched forward. Clemson's Ridge fell away behind them, growing smaller and smaller until it was just a smudge on the horizon, then nothing at all. The road, if it could be called that, was barely more than a pair of ruts cutting through grassland that stretched endlessly in every direction. Mountains rose to the west, purple and distant. The sky arched overhead, impossibly blue, impossibly vast. For the first hour, they didn't speak. Evelyn watched the landscape roll past, trying not to think about how far from civilization they were getting, trying not to calculate how long it would take to walk back if something went wrong. Finally, Rourke broke the silence. "You always this quiet? I was under the impression you didn't have time for small talk." "I don't. That's why I'm asking about you, not the weather." "What do you want to know?" "Where you're from, how you ended up answering mail order advertisements, what you did before this." Evelyn considered deflecting, giving him the abbreviated version she'd perfected over the years. But what was the point? If they were going to do this, really do this, he'd find out eventually anyway. "Missouri," she said. "Born and raised. My father was a shopkeeper. My mother died when I was 12. I raised my younger brother after that, kept house, helped in the shop. When I was 23, my father remarried a woman who made it clear there wasn't room for both of us. So I left." "And your brother?" "Went west to try mining. Last I heard, he was in California. That was 5 years ago." Rourke nodded. "You said you taught school." "For 3 years. Small town. About 40 students, ages 5 to 15. I liked it." She paused. "Until I didn't." "What changed?" "I turned 30. Unmarried. The school board decided I was setting a bad example for the children, corrupting them with my spinsterhood." The bitterness leaked through despite her best efforts. "They let me finish the term, then didn't renew my contract, suggested I might be happier elsewhere." "So you answered an advertisement?" "So I answered an advertisement." Evelyn watched a hawk circle overhead, hunting. The first man who'd placed it was kind. Older, widowed. He needed someone to help with his farm. But when I arrived, his mother was there. She took one look at me and declared I wasn't suitable. "Too independent," she said. Her son needed someone biddable. "And the others?" "Various reasons. Too old, too plain, too educated. Apparently knowing how to read and cipher makes some men nervous. One man actually told me I'd be perfect if I just smiled more and talked less." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. By the 6th rejection, I started wondering if they were right, if I really was defective somehow. "That's horseshit." Evelyn looked at him, startled by the bluntness. Rourke kept his eyes on the road, but his jaw was tight. "You're not defective. They were looking for someone to fit into their idea of what a wife should be. Young, quiet, grateful, easily controlled. You don't fit that mold. That's not a flaw. That's just incompatibility." "You sound very certain." "I am certain. I've hired enough men to know that the best workers are usually the ones other people passed over. The ones who don't fit the standard pattern. They work harder because they have something to prove. They're loyal because they remember what it's like to be overlooked. And they're tougher because they've had to be." He glanced at her. "You're tougher than you think, Miss Hart." "You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you answered 7 advertisements, traveled to 7 towns, faced 7 rejections, and you're still here, sitting beside me, willing to try again. Most people would have given up by number 3. Maybe I'm just stubborn. Stubbornness is underrated." They fell into silence again, but it was different now. Less awkward, more comfortable. The wagon creaked and swayed over the uneven ground. The horses plodded steadily forward, their breath steaming in the cool morning air. Around midday, Rourke pulled off the road, such as it was, and stopped near a creek. "We'll rest here. Let the horses drink." Evelyn climbed down, her legs stiff from sitting. She stretched carefully, feeling every one of her 31 years in her lower back. Rourke unhitched the horses and led them to the water, moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "You want to eat now or push on a few more hours?" he asked. "Push on. I'm fine." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We'll stop before dark. Make camp properly." They continued through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they moved into more rugged territory. The grassland gave way to scrub brush and rocky outcroppings. The mountains grew closer, their peaks sharp against the sky. The air smelled different here, drier, sharper, tinged with sage and dust. By the time Rourke pulled the wagon into a sheltered spot between two large boulders, Evelyn's entire body ached. She climbed down carefully, trying not to wince. "Sore?" Rourke asked, already unhitching the horses. "I'll manage." "That means yes." He nodded toward a flat area near the rocks. "Set up your bedroll there. I'll handle the horses and get a fire started." "I can help." "I know, but you've been sitting in a wagon all day, and you need to stretch out before you stiffen up completely. Go. I've got this." It wasn't worth arguing about. Evelyn retrieved her bedroll from the wagon and spread it out on the ground. By the time she finished, Rourke had the horses settled and was building a fire with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times in 1,000 different places. Within minutes, flames were crackling, and he was heating coffee in a battered tin pot. He pulled out supplies from the wagon: jerky, hardtack, some cheese that had probably seen better days. Frontier fare. Nothing fancy. Evelyn had eaten worse. They ate in silence as the sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and deep purple. The temperature dropped with it, the heat of the day bleeding away into desert cold. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself, grateful for the fire. "Cold?" Rourke asked. "I'll be fine once I'm in my bedroll." He disappeared into the wagon and returned with a heavy wool blanket. "Take this. Nights get brutal out here." "What about you?" "I've got another one." "Take it." Evelyn wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. It smelled like horse and leather and wood smoke, not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. Rourke settled across the fire from her, his own blanket draped over his shoulders, coffee cup in his hands. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said after a while. "Go ahead." "Why haven't you married again? After your second wife, you must have had opportunities." Rourke was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "My first wife died in childbirth. The baby too. Sarah. I wanted to name her Sarah." His voice was flat, factual. "My second wife married me thinking ranch life would be romantic. It wasn't. She lasted 8 months before she tried to run off with the blacksmith's son. Took half my cash reserves with her. I heard she disappeared. She tried to. I caught up to her in Denver, got the money back. Put her on a train to San Francisco with enough to start over and a promise that if I ever saw her again, I'd press charges for theft." He sipped his coffee. "After that, I decided marriage wasn't worth the trouble. But the ranch kept growing, and I kept getting more tired, and I finally admitted I needed help. Real help. Not hired help. A partner." "But you said yourself this isn't romance." "It's not. Romance is nice when you've got time for it. I don't. What I need is someone competent and tough who won't fall apart when things get hard. Someone who'll stick around even when it's not easy." He looked at her across the fire. "That's not romance. That's something more practical, but it's also more honest." Evelyn pulled the blanket tighter. "What if I can't do it? What if I get there and realize I'm not tough enough or competent enough? Then we'll figure it out. But I don't think that's going to happen." "You barely know me." "I know enough. You wouldn't still be here if you didn't have steel in you somewhere." He set down his coffee cup. "Get some sleep, Miss Hart. Tomorrow's another long day." He banked the fire, checked the horses one more time, then settled into his own bedroll on the opposite side of the camp. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep. Evelyn lay awake, staring up at the stars. They were brighter out here than she'd ever seen them, thousands of pinpricks of light against the velvet black. No moon yet, just stars and darkness and the sound of Rourke's steady breathing across the fire. She'd made her choice. For better or worse, she was committed now. Tomorrow, they'd continue the journey, and the day after that, and the day after that, until they reached the Rourke Ranch, until she found out whether she was strong enough for the life she'd agreed to, until she discovered whether being chosen, really chosen, not just accepted by default, was going to save her or break her. The stars offered no answers. Evelyn closed her eyes and tried to sleep. The second day brought heat that pressed down like a physical weight. Evelyn woke before dawn to find Rourke already up, the fire rekindled, coffee boiling in the battered pot. Her body screamed protest when she sat up. Muscles she didn't know she had were making themselves known with sharp insistence. Morning, Rourke said, not looking up from where he was checking the wagon wheels. Coffee's ready. We leave in 20 minutes. Evelyn pushed herself to her feet, biting back a groan. Everything hurt. Her back, her legs, her shoulders from bracing against the wagon's constant jolting. She felt like she'd been beaten with a stick. Rourke glanced over, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. You'll get used to it. When? Third or fourth day, usually. Fantastic. She poured herself coffee and drank it standing up because sitting back down seemed like admitting defeat. The sky was lightening in the east, pale gray bleeding into pink. The air was cold enough to make her breath visible, though she knew that would change within hours. They were back on the road, if the twin ruts they followed could be called that, before the sun fully cleared the horizon. The landscape had changed overnight, or maybe Evelyn was just noticing it more in the clear morning light. Rockier now, steeper. The mountains loomed closer, no longer distant purple shapes, but solid walls of stone and pine. How much of this land is yours? Evelyn asked as they crested a ridge. Everything you can see in that direction. Rourke nodded west. For about 15 miles. North to that line of cottonwoods by the river. South to the red rocks. East. He paused. East is complicated. There's a dispute with a neighboring rancher about the boundary. We're working it out. Working it out how? Lawyers, surveyors, occasionally fists, though I try to avoid that. Bad for business. Does it work? Avoiding it? Not as often as I'd like. Often as... He shifted the reins. The frontier attracts a certain type of man, the kind who thinks might makes right and legal boundaries are suggestions. I've had to make it very clear that my boundaries aren't suggestions. Hence the reputation for ruthlessness. Hence the reputation. He didn't sound bothered by it. Out here, you're either strong enough to hold what's yours or someone takes it. I worked too hard building this ranch to let someone take it because I was too soft to fight back. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking rhythmically. Evelyn's body gradually loosened as the motion worked the stiffness from her muscles. Not comfortable exactly, but less agonizing. Around mid-morning, they passed the bleached skeleton of a cow, picked clean by scavengers. Rourke barely glanced at it. Evelyn stared. Happens, Rourke said. Predators, disease, accidents. You lose stock out here, part of the business. How much do you lose? In a good year? Maybe 5%. Bad year? Could be 15 or 20. Last winter we lost almost 30%. Late blizzard caught the herd in the open, froze half of them before we could get them to shelter. That must have been devastating. It was expensive. Devastating is when you lose people, not cattle. He glanced at her. You squeamish about death? No more than anyone else. That's not an answer. Evelyn thought about it. I watched my mother die. Watched my father grieve himself into someone I didn't recognize. Lost students to fever, to accidents, to things that shouldn't have killed them but did anyway. I'm not squeamish, but I'm not numb either. Death still matters. Good. The day it stops mattering is the day you've lost something important. Rourke adjusted his hat against the climbing sun. But you can't let it paralyze you either. Things die out here. Animals, people, plans. You mourn, and then you keep moving. Because stopping gets you killed faster than anything else. Is that what you did when your first wife died? She regretted the question immediately, too personal, too probing, but Rourke didn't seem offended. No, he said quietly. I stopped. For about 6 months I stopped everything. Barely kept the ranch running, drank too much, made bad decisions, lost good men because I wasn't paying attention, nearly lost the ranch itself. He paused. Then one morning I woke up and realized Sarah wouldn't have wanted that. She'd have wanted me to live, so I started living again. Took a while to remember how. How long? Longer than 6 months. Less than forever. Somewhere in between. He looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. You ever lose someone like that? Someone who changed everything? No. I've lost people I cared about, but never like that. Never someone who was my whole world. Lucky. Am I? In that respect, yes. That kind of loss leaves marks, changes how you see things. how you trust. He turned back to the road. It's why I'm not offering you romance, Miss Hart. I used it all up the first time. What's left is practical, functional. Maybe that's not fair to you, but it's honest. Evelyn absorbed that. What if I wanted romance anyway? Do you? I don't know. I've never had it, so I don't know what I'm missing. Keep it that way. Romance makes you stupid, makes you believe in things that don't exist and ignore things that do. Practical partnerships last longer. That's incredibly cynical. That's incredibly realistic. But there was no heat in his voice, just tired certainty. They stopped again at midday, this time by a stream that cut through a narrow canyon. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. Rourke watered the horses while Evelyn refilled their canteens and splashed water on her face, washing away the dust that had coated her skin. We're making good time, Rourke said, studying the sun. Should reach the ranch by tomorrow afternoon instead of evening, assuming we don't run into problems. What kind of problems? The kind I can't predict. That's what makes them problems. They ate quickly. More jerky, more hardtack, some dried fruit that was better than nothing. Evelyn was developing a deep hatred for hardtack. It had the texture of wood and roughly the same flavor. Once we get to the ranch, Rourke said, things are going to move fast. I've been gone almost a week, which means there's going to be a backlog of decisions, problems, questions. I won't have much time to ease you into things. I didn't expect easing. Good, because you'll meet the men first thing, all of them. I want them to see you, know who you are, understand that you're there in a position of authority. He looked at her seriously. This is important, Miss Hart. How you handle that first meeting will determine how they treat you for weeks, maybe months. You need to be firm, clear. Don't apologize for existing. Don't try to make them like you. Respect is more important than being liked. I understand. Do you? Because some of these men have been on the frontier their whole lives. They've never answered to a woman. Some of them will resent you on principle. Others will test you to see if you break. You can't show weakness, not at first. Later, once you've established yourself, you can afford to be softer, but not at the beginning. Evelyn's stomach tightened. What if they don't respect me no matter what I do? Then I'll make it clear that disrespecting you means disrespecting me, and no one who works for me gets to do that. But I'd rather you earn it yourself. It'll stick better. No pressure then. I wouldn't have brought you if I thought you couldn't handle it. He stood, brushing dust from his pants. Come on, we're burning daylight. The afternoon stretched long and hot. The terrain grew rougher, forcing them to slow down to navigate rocky sections and steep grades. Twice they had to stop and clear fallen branches from the path. Once, they spooked a small herd of deer that bounded away in graceful panic. Evelyn's mind kept circling back to what Rourke had said about the men. 30 of them, he'd mentioned, maybe more. Rough, hardened frontier workers who wouldn't take kindly to a woman trying to manage them. She'd dealt with difficult men before, school board members who thought women shouldn't teach, shopkeepers who shortchanged her because they assumed she couldn't count, men who thought her unmarried status meant she was available for crude comments. But this was different. This wasn't navigating around difficult men. This was asserting authority over them. You're thinking too hard, Rourke said suddenly. I can hear it from here. I'm thinking about tomorrow. Don't, you'll just work yourself into a state. Deal with it when it happens. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who has to prove herself. I prove myself every day. Different context, same principle. Every man on that ranch is watching to see if I'm still strong enough to run it. If I make too many mistakes, if I show too much weakness, they'll start questioning whether I should be in charge. Authority isn't permanent, Miss Hart. It's something you maintain through constant effort. That sounds exhausting. It is. But it's also necessary. Welcome to leadership. They made camp that night in a small valley sheltered by pine trees. The air smelled different here, cleaner, sharper, with the resinous tang of evergreens. Rourke built the fire while Evelyn tended the horses, brushing them down the way she'd seen him do it. The animals were patient with her inexperience, standing calm while she worked out the rhythm of the task. You're a natural, Rourke said, watching her finish. I'm adequate. There's a difference. Adequate is better than incompetent. Most people can't even manage that. He handed her a plate of beans he'd heated over the fire. Real food this time, not just jerky. Tomorrow night you'll be sleeping in an actual bed, eating real meals, taking a real bath. Is there a bathhouse? There's a bathing room off the main house, not fancy, but functional. You'll have privacy. Evelyn tried to imagine it. A real bath, hot water, soap that wasn't the harsh lye soap she'd been using for weeks. It seemed almost decadent. "What's the house like?" she asked. "Big, 2 stories. Built it myself over the course of 5 years. Stone foundation, timber frame, shake roof. Nothing fancy, but it's solid. Doesn't leak. Keeps the heat in winter and stays relatively cool in summer. 6 bedrooms upstairs, though I only use one. You can have your pick of the others. 6 bedrooms seems excessive for one person. It seemed reasonable when I was planning for a family." His voice went flat. "Didn't work out that way, but the rooms are there anyway. Might as well use them." They ate in silence for a while. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, lonely and wild. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said finally. "You keep asking permission to ask questions. Just ask them. Why did you really choose me? The truth, not the explanation about endurance and persistence." Rourke set down his plate and leaned back against his saddle. "You want the truth?" "Yes. I'm tired." He said it simply, without drama. "I've been running that ranch alone for too long, making every decision, handling every crisis. I'm 41 years old, and I feel 60. I need help, but I can't afford to bring in someone who'll need constant supervision or who'll fall apart under pressure. When I read that you were 31 and had been through the selection process multiple times without success, I thought maybe you'd be practical enough to understand what I actually needed instead of what you wished I was offering. So I was convenient. No, if I wanted convenient, I'd have chosen the prettiest girl on that platform and dealt with the consequences later. You were strategic. There's a difference." "I'm not sure that's better. It's honest. And honestly, Miss Hart, you were the only one on that list who might actually be able to do this job. The others were too young, too inexperienced, too likely to expect something I can't give. You've been beaten down enough to know reality isn't romantic. That makes you qualified." Evelyn turned that over in her mind. It should have bothered her more, being chosen because she'd failed enough times to become practical. But instead, she found it almost refreshing. No pretense. No flattery, just cold assessment. "I appreciate the honesty," she said finally, "even if it's depressing. Life's depressing. At least we're honest about it." He stood, stretching. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's the day you find out if you can actually do what you agreed to." That night, sleep came harder than the night before. Evelyn lay in her bedroll, staring up through the pine branches at the stars beyond, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd committed to. Tomorrow she'd arrive at the Rourke Ranch. Tomorrow she'd meet 30 strange men and have to convince them she deserved their respect. Tomorrow she'd start trying to build a life out of nothing but grit and determination. She'd done it before, she reminded herself, after her mother died, after her father remarried, after the school board fired her. She'd rebuilt herself from scratch multiple times. This was just one more reconstruction. She could do this. She had to. Because the alternative was going back to that selection platform, standing at the end of that line, waiting to be overlooked one more time. And Evelyn Hart was done being overlooked. Morning came with frost on the ground and Rourke shaking her shoulder. "Rise up. We need to cover ground before the day heats up." They were on the road before dawn had fully broken, the wagon rattling over increasingly rough terrain. The mountains had stopped being distant scenery and become immediate reality, massive walls of stone and timber that blocked out half the sky. The path they followed wound between them, climbing steadily. "Almost there," Rourke said around mid-morning. "Another hour, maybe less." Evelyn's heart started beating faster. What should I expect? Chaos, probably. I've been gone too long, but we'll handle it. He glanced at her. "Remember what I said. Firm, clear, no apologies. You're there because I chose you, and that means you have authority. Use it. What if? No what ifs. You'll figure it out as you go. That's all any of us do." The valley opened up ahead of them without warning, the narrow canyon suddenly widening into a broad expanse of grassland hemmed in by mountains on three sides. And there, spread across the valley floor like a small settlement, was the Rourke Ranch. Evelyn's breath caught. She'd been expecting something impressive, but this exceeded her imagination. The main house dominated the center, exactly as Rourke had described it. 2 stories of solid timber and stone, substantial and permanent. But surrounding it was an entire complex. Barns, stables, bunkhouses, storage sheds, corrals that held dozens of horses. Cattle dotted the distant grassland, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Smoke rose from several chimneys. People moved between buildings, small figures from this distance, but clearly numerous. This is... Evelyn couldn't finish the sentence. This is home, Rourke said quietly, for better or worse. As they descended into the valley, people started noticing their arrival. Men emerged from buildings, shading their eyes against the sun. Work slowed, then stopped. By the time the wagon rolled into the main yard, 20 or 30 men had gathered, watching with open curiosity. Rourke pulled the wagon to a stop and set the brake. The silence was profound. Evelyn could feel the weight of every single eye on her, assessing, judging, calculating. "Stay in the wagon," Rourke said quietly. Then, louder, addressing the assembled men. "Where's Garrett?" A tall man with a thick beard pushed through the crowd. "Right here, boss. Wasn't expecting you back until tomorrow." "Made better time than anticipated." Rourke jumped down from the wagon. "Situation report, quick version." Garrett rattled off a list of issues. A section of fence down on the north pasture. 3 horses with split hooves, ongoing dispute about water rights with the Miller Ranch, supplies running low, 2 men sick with fever. Rourke listened, nodding, his expression unreadable. "Handle the fence and the horses yourself. Send Thompson to Miller's place to continue negotiations. Get the supply order ready. I'll review it tonight. Isolate the sick men in the far bunkhouse and make sure everyone else washes up properly. Anything else that can't wait? Just curious about your passenger." Garrett's eyes flicked to Evelyn, not hostile, but not friendly either. "We weren't expecting company." "She's not company. She's my future wife." Rourke said it flatly, like announcing the weather. "This is Miss Evelyn Hart. She'll be helping run the household operations. You'll treat her with the same respect you'd give me. Pass that along to everyone. Clear?" The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn watched the news ripple through the crowd. Surprise, confusion, skepticism. A few of the younger men grinned. Most looked uncertain. One older man crossed his arms and scowled outright. Garrett recovered first. "Understood, boss. Welcome, Miss Hart." "Thank you," Evelyn said, keeping her voice level. Rourke turned to her and offered his hand. "Come on, I'll show you the house." She took his hand and climbed down, acutely aware of every man watching her movement. She was dusty, rumpled, obviously travel-worn, not exactly an impressive first appearance, but she kept her head up and her expression neutral as Rourke guided her through the crowd toward the main house. The whispers started before they'd gone 10 steps. "He's joking, right? Look at her. She's ancient." "Boss has finally lost his mind." "Shut up." Garrett's voice cut through the murmurs. "You heard the man. Show some respect or answer to him." The whispers didn't stop, but they got quieter. Evelyn forced herself not to react, not to show that she'd heard. Firm, clear. No apologies. Rourke's words echoed in her head. The house's front door opened before they reached it, and a woman emerged, late 50s, gray hair pulled back severely, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked Evelyn up and down with the thoroughness of a general inspecting troops. "Martha," Rourke said, "this is Miss Evelyn Hart. She'll be staying in the house. Get her settled, then bring her to my office." "Yes, sir." Martha's voice was crisp, professional. "This way, Miss Hart." Rourke squeezed Evelyn's hand once, briefly, then released it and headed off toward one of the barns, already calling orders to men who scattered to obey. Just like that, Evelyn was alone with Martha. "Come," Martha said, already turning back into the house. "You look like you've been dragged behind that wagon instead of riding in it. When's the last time you had a proper bath?" 3 days ago. "Unacceptable. We'll remedy that immediately." Martha led her through a front hall that was larger than some houses Evelyn had lived in, up a staircase with a solid oak banister, down a corridor lined with closed doors. She pushed open the fourth door on the left. This room, it's the best of the guest rooms. Faces east, gets morning light, stays cool in the afternoon. Bed's already made up. I'll have hot water brought up for a bath. The room was simple but comfortable. A large bed with a thick quilt, a wardrobe, a washstand, a chair by the window. Clean, organized, far nicer than anywhere Evelyn had stayed in months. "Thank you," Evelyn said. Martha paused at the door, studying her with those sharp eyes. "He didn't tell me he was bringing someone back. Caleb usually tells me everything." It was a quick decision. Nothing about Caleb Rourke is quick. He thinks through everything 6 ways before he acts. Martha's expression softened slightly. "But I suppose that's his business, not mine. Bath first. Then you'll want to change into something clean before you meet with him. Do you have clean clothes?" "1 set, in my bag." "I'll have it brought up. Be ready in an hour." Martha left, closing the door firmly behind her. Evelyn sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. The mattress was soft. Actually soft, not lumpy or hard. She could fall asleep right here and not wake up for a week. But there wasn't time for that. An hour later, scrubbed clean and dressed in her only other outfit, a dark blue dress that was marginally less worn than the brown one, Evelyn made her way back downstairs. Martha appeared as if summoned and led her to a room off the main hall. Rourke's office was exactly what she'd expected. Functional, organized, dominated by a massive desk covered in ledgers and papers. He stood at the window looking out over the ranch, but turned when she entered. "Better?" he asked. "Much, thank you." "Good. Sit down. We need to talk about tomorrow." Evelyn sat in one of the chairs facing the desk. Rourke remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. "Tomorrow morning, I'm calling a meeting of all the men, everyone who works here, full-time or temporary, probably 35, maybe 40 people. I'm going to introduce you properly and explain your role here. After that, you'll be on your own with them for the most part. I'll be dealing with the ranch operations, which means you'll be handling the household. Think you can manage?" "I'll find out." That's not confidence. It's honesty. I've never managed anything on this scale before, but I learn fast and I'm not afraid of hard work. Rourke studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Martha will help you for the first week or so. She's been running the household since my second wife left, and she knows every inch of this operation. Listen to her. She's tough, but she's fair, and she knows what she's doing." "I will." "Good." He moved to the desk and pulled out a ledger. "This is the household budget. Everything that goes into keeping this place running: food, supplies, maintenance, wages for the household staff. Starting next week, this will be your responsibility. You'll track expenses, authorize purchases, make sure we're not hemorrhaging money on stupidity. Can you handle numbers?" "I kept books for my father's shop for years. I can handle numbers." "Excellent. You'll also be responsible for meal planning and preparation, not the actual cooking, we have staff for that, but making sure there's enough food for everyone and that it gets served on time. Coordinating cleaning and maintenance, handling correspondence that comes to the house, managing any issues that arise among the household staff." He looked up from the ledger. "It's a lot. I won't lie about that. But it's manageable if you're organized." "I'm organized." "We'll see." He closed the ledger. "One more thing. The men are going to test you. They're going to push boundaries, see what they can get away with. Some of it will be harmless. Jokes, mild disrespect, seeing if you'll complain. Some of it might be worse. You need to shut it down immediately. Don't wait for it to escalate. Don't wait for me to handle it. You handle it yourself. Understood?" "Understood." "And if someone crosses a line, actually crosses it, not just gets close, you come to me immediately. I won't tolerate certain things, and those men know it. But I need you to tell me if it happens because I can't be everywhere at once." "I will." Rourke looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. "This isn't going to be easy, Miss Hart. I want to make sure you understand that. The next few weeks are going to test you in ways you can't predict. You're going to want to quit, maybe more than once. But if you can get through it, if you can establish yourself here, then we might actually make this work. And if I can't, then I'll honor my promise. Passage to wherever you want to go. Money to start over. No hard feelings." He paused. But I don't think it'll come to that. Why not? Because you're still here. After everything, 7 rejections, 3 days of rough travel, walking into a ranch full of hostile men, you're still here. That's not weakness, Miss Hart. That's strength. And strength is exactly what this place needs. Evelyn wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that she was strong enough for what came next. But belief and trust were luxuries she'd stopped being able to afford years ago. All she had left was determination. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The morning meeting happened in the largest barn, where there was enough space for everyone to gather without crushing together. Evelyn stood beside Rourke near the front, trying not to fidget while men filed in. Some curious, some openly skeptical, a few actively hostile. The smell of hay and leather and unwashed bodies was overwhelming in the enclosed space. Martha had positioned herself near the back, arms crossed, watching everything with those sharp eyes. She told Evelyn at breakfast that morning, "Don't expect them to like you. Expect them to respect you. There's a difference, and only one of them matters." When the shuffling and murmuring finally died down, Rourke stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make any grand gestures. He just started talking, and somehow that was enough to command absolute attention. "Most of you met Miss Hart yesterday when we arrived. For those who didn't, this is Evelyn Hart. She'll be living here permanently and taking over household operations starting today. That means she's responsible for food, supplies, staff coordination, and anything else that keeps this place running smoothly. Martha will continue in her current role, but will report to Miss Hart going forward." A few men exchanged glances. Someone in the back coughed. Rourke kept talking. "Miss Hart has my full authority to make decisions regarding household matters. If she tells you something needs doing, it needs doing. If she asks you a question, you answer it respectfully. If you have a problem with her authority, you take it up with me, not her. And I promise you won't enjoy that conversation." "Boss," one of the older men spoke up, his tone carefully neutral. "No disrespect intended, but most of us have been running things just fine without additional oversight. Why do we need someone new coming in and changing how things work?" Because just fine isn't good enough anymore. This ranch has tripled in size over the last 5 years. The systems we had when there were 15 men don't work with 40. We need better organization, better planning, better management. That's what Miss Hart is here to provide. "And if we disagree with her decisions," another man asked, "then you present your disagreement professionally and let her make the final call. Same as you would with me, same as you would with Garrett or any other person in authority here." Rourke's voice hardened slightly. "I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you how things are going to work. Anyone who can't accept that is welcome to collect their wages and leave. No hard feelings. But if you stay, you follow the rules." Silence settled over the barn like dust. Evelyn could feel the resistance in the air, thick and tangible. These men didn't want her here. They didn't trust her. They didn't respect her. And Rourke's declaration of her authority wasn't going to change that overnight. "Miss Hart," Rourke said, turning to her, "anything you want to add?" This was it. The moment Martha had warned her about. The moment Rourke had prepared her for during the journey. Say the wrong thing and she'd lose them completely. Say nothing and she'd look weak. Evelyn stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked out at the assembled men, weathered faces, hard eyes, crossed arms. 40 men who thought she didn't belong here. "I'm not here to make your lives harder," she said, pitching her voice to carry without shouting. "I'm here to make this operation run more efficiently. That benefits everyone. Better organization means fewer supply shortages. Better planning means less wasted time and effort. Better management means problems get solved before they become crises." She paused, meeting as many eyes as she could. "I know most of you don't want me here. That's fine. You don't have to want me here. You just have to work with me. Do your jobs, answer questions honestly when I ask them, and we'll get along fine. Give me problems, and I'll give you problems right back. Fair enough?" Someone in the middle snorted. "Mighty confident for someone who just got here. Confidence has nothing to do with it. This is simple math. Mr. Rourke hired me to do a job. I'm going to do that job whether you like me or not. Your opinion of me doesn't change my responsibilities. And what makes you think you can handle those responsibilities?" The question came from the same older man who'd spoken before. No offense, ma'am, but managing a frontier ranch isn't the same as keeping house in some town. You're right, it's not. Which is why I'll be learning as I go, asking questions when I don't know something, and relying on people like Martha who actually understand how things work here. I'm not too proud to admit when I need help. Are you? That got a few appreciative chuckles from some of the younger men. The older man's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Rourke stepped forward again. That's all. Get back to work. Miss Hart, Martha, come with me. The men dispersed slowly, still muttering among themselves. Evelyn caught fragments as they passed. Too old. Won't last a month. Boss has lost his mind. She kept her expression neutral until the barn emptied, then let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Well? She asked Rourke. Well what? How did I do? You didn't fall apart. That's better than I expected. He started walking toward the main house. But the real test comes now. Words are easy. Action is what matters. Martha fell into step beside Evelyn. He's right. They'll be watching everything you do for the next week, looking for mistakes. Don't give them any. Helpful advice. How exactly do I avoid making mistakes when I don't know what I'm doing yet? You ask me before you do anything stupid. That's what I'm here for. Martha's tone was dry, but not unkind. Come on, I'll show you the kitchen and introduce you to the staff. We need to plan meals for the next week. The kitchen was larger than Evelyn's childhood home had been. A massive space dominated by a cast-iron stove that looked like it could cook for an army, which, she supposed, it did. 2 women worked at a long table, one kneading dough, the other chopping vegetables. Both looked up when Martha entered, their expressions wary. This is Miss Hart, Martha said briskly. She'll be overseeing household operations. Miss Hart, this is Lucia and her daughter Carmen. They handle most of the cooking. Lucia was perhaps 45, heavy-set with strong arms and flour dusting her dark hair. Carmen couldn't have been more than 20, petite and pretty with her mother's dark eyes. Both nodded politely, but said nothing. Pleased to meet you, Evelyn said. Lucia wiped her hands on her apron. You cook, Miss Hart? Some basic things, nothing on this scale. Good. Then you stay out of my kitchen and let me do my work. It wasn't hostile, just matter of fact. I've been cooking for this ranch for 8 years. I know what I'm doing. You want to help? You tell me how many mouths to feed and what supplies we have. I'll figure out the rest. Evelyn glanced at Martha, who gave the tiniest nod of approval. That seems reasonable. Currently feeding 42 men 3 meals a day, Martha said, pulling out a ledger from a shelf. Plus household staff, which is myself, Lucia, Carmen, and 2 boys who handle cleaning and maintenance. Supply deliveries come every 2 weeks from town. We're due for 1 in 4 days. What happens if we run short between deliveries? We make do. Stretch what we have. Sometimes send someone to town for emergency supplies, but that's expensive and time-consuming. Martha flipped through pages covered in neat handwriting. This is the supply log. Everything that comes in, everything that goes out. You need to learn this system. Evelyn studied the ledger. It was meticulously organized. Dates, quantities, costs, supplier information. Martha's work, clearly. This is excellent record-keeping. Of course it is. I'm not an idiot. Martha snapped the ledger shut. But I'm getting old, and my eyes aren't what they used to be. The numbers blur together after too long. That's part of why Caleb brought you here. Fresh eyes. Younger hands that don't cramp up after an hour of writing. It was the first direct acknowledgement that Evelyn's presence might actually be useful rather than just tolerated. She decided not to make a big deal of it. Show me what else I need to know. The rest of the morning was a whirlwind of information. Martha walked her through every aspect of household management, where supplies were stored, how to track inventory, which suppliers were reliable and which weren't, how to coordinate cleaning schedules, how to handle the endless stream of small crises that arose daily in an operation this size. Evelyn's head spun trying to absorb it all. Lunch was served in a large dining hall attached to the main house. The men filed in shifts, grabbing plates of stew and bread before settling at long tables. Evelyn ate with Martha in a smaller room off to the side, what Martha called the household office. You'll eat most meals here, Martha explained. Unless Caleb specifically asks you to join him, which he probably won't. He usually eats in his office while working. That seems lonely. That's practical. He doesn't have time to waste on social meals. Martha took a bite of stew. Don't romanticize him, Miss Hart. I've watched women make that mistake before. Caleb Rourke is a good man and a fair employer, but he's not built for softness. His first wife's death broke something in him. He put the pieces back together, but they don't fit the same way anymore. He told me he used up all his romance on her. He's not wrong. What's left is duty and determination. If you came here expecting affection, you'll be disappointed. I came here expecting work, that's all. Martha studied her with those sharp eyes. Good. That might mean you'll actually survive this. The afternoon brought the first real test. Evelyn was reviewing supply lists in the household office when one of the younger ranch hands appeared in the doorway, cap in hand, looking uncomfortable. Miss Hart, there's a problem with the bunkhouse. Water pump's broken. Been broken since this morning. We can't wash up properly, and the place is starting to smell. Martha usually handles this kind of thing, but she said to ask you. Evelyn stood. Show me. The bunkhouse was exactly what she'd expected. A long, low building lined with beds, smelling of sweat and leather and unwashed bodies. A dozen men were inside, most of them watching her with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. The pump in question stood in the corner, its handle hanging loose. When did it break? Evelyn asked. This morning. Jensen tried to fix it, but he made it worse. The young man gestured at another hand who scowled. I didn't make it worse. It was already busted. You stripped the bolt trying to force it. I was trying to help. Enough, Evelyn said sharply. Both men stopped arguing. Where's the nearest working pump? Main house, but that's a long walk just to wash up. Then you'll make the long walk until this one's fixed. Who here knows anything about pump repair? Silence. The men exchanged glances. No one? In a ranch this size, no one knows basic maintenance? Evelyn kept her voice level, but she let her skepticism show. We're ranch hands, ma'am, not mechanics, Jensen said defensively. We know horses and cattle. Pumps are someone else's job. Whose job? More silence. Then one of the older men spoke up. Usually we wait for Garrett to handle it, or the boss if it's urgent enough. Mr. Rourke has better things to do than fix every broken pump on this ranch. And if Garrett's handling it, that means he's not handling something else that actually needs his expertise. Evelyn examined the pump more closely. The handle was definitely stripped, but the mechanism itself looked intact. Anyone have tools? Someone produced a basic toolbox. Evelyn had watched her father repair similar pumps 100 times in the shop. The principle was the same. You just needed to remove the damaged bolt, find a replacement, and reinstall it properly. She dug through the toolbox until she found what she needed. You're going to fix it yourself? Jensen sounded incredulous. Unless you'd rather wait for Mr. Rourke to find time in his schedule, which might be tomorrow, might be next week. She started working on the bolt. Or you could make the long walk to the main house every time you need water, your choice. The men watched in silence as she worked. It took longer than it should have. Her hands were smaller than her father's had been, and the bolt was stuck tight. But eventually she got it free. Finding a replacement took another 10 minutes of searching through the toolbox, but she found one that fit. Installing it was the easy part. When she finished, she worked the handle a few times. Water sloshed into the basin. The pump held. There, fixed. Next time something breaks, try fixing it yourselves before running to management. We're all busy. A little self-sufficiency goes a long way. She closed the toolbox and handed it back. And clean this place. It smells like a barn. She walked out before anyone could respond, her heart racing. Behind her, she heard stunned silence, then low voices, then someone laughing. Didn't expect that. Neither did I. Think she'll last? Longer than I thought, anyway. Evelyn kept walking, her hands shaking slightly. That could have gone very differently. They could have mocked her for trying, could have actively sabotaged her efforts, could have refused to accept the fix even after she'd completed it. But they hadn't. It wasn't respect, not yet. But it was something. A crack in the wall of resistance. She'd take it. Martha was waiting when she returned to the house, a slight smile on her weathered face. Heard you fixed the bunkhouse pump. Word travels fast. Always does. You impress some of the men. Jensen's telling everyone you got that bolt unstuck faster than he could have. That's high praise from him. He doesn't give compliments easily. I just did what needed doing. Exactly. Which is more than most women in your position would attempt. Martha gestured toward the office. Come on, we need to finalize the supply order before dinner. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Evelyn reviewed budgets, approved supply lists, coordinated with Lucia about meal planning, handled 3 more minor crises that Martha insisted she deal with herself rather than asking for help. By the time dinner was served, her head was pounding and her body ached from tension. She ate alone in the household office, too exhausted to care that the stew had gone cold while she worked. Through the wall, she could hear the men in the dining hall, their voices loud and rough. Someone was telling a story that kept getting interrupted by laughter. Someone else was arguing about horses. Normal sounds. Familiar sounds. The sounds of people who belonged here. Evelyn didn't belong yet. Maybe she never would. But she was here anyway, trying to carve out a space for herself through sheer stubborn determination. Later that night, there was a knock on her bedroom door. She opened it to find Rourke standing in the hallway, still dressed for work, looking exhausted. Got a minute? He asked. Of course. He stepped inside, glancing around the room briefly before focusing on her. I heard about the pump and about how you handled Jensen's incompetence. I didn't handle anything. I just fixed a broken pump. You did more than that. You proved you're not just here to give orders. You're willing to do the work yourself. That matters to men like these. They respect competence more than authority. He paused. Good work today. The praise was unexpected. Evelyn felt something warm uncurl in her chest. Thank you. Don't get comfortable. Today was easy. Tomorrow will be harder. Someone's going to test you more seriously. Someone always does. He moved toward the door, then stopped. You holding up all right? I'm tired, but I'll manage. You always say you'll manage. That's not the same as saying you're fine. Because I'm not fine. I'm overwhelmed and exhausted and terrified I'm going to make a mistake that proves everyone right about me not belonging here. But I'm still standing, which means I'm managing. That's the best I've got right now. Rourke was quiet for a moment, then he nodded. Fair enough. Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, too tired to undress properly. She'd survived day 1, barely, and tomorrow would be harder. But she'd survived worse. She could do this. She had to. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. Wake before dawn, help coordinate breakfast, review budgets and supply lists, handle whatever crisis arose. And there was always a crisis. A missing shipment, a dispute between staff members, equipment failures, men testing boundaries, seeing how far they could push before she pushed back. Evelyn pushed back every time. When 2 ranch hands got into a fistfight over a card game and expected her to overlook it because boys will be boys, she docked both their wages and assigned them double cleaning duty for a week. When one of the younger men made a crude comment about her appearance, thinking she wouldn't hear, she confronted him directly in front of his friends and made it clear that kind of disrespect wouldn't be tolerated. When supplies arrived short and the delivery driver tried to claim he'd brought the full order, she pulled out the manifest, pointed out the discrepancies in handwriting that proved he'd altered it, and sent him back to town with a message for his employer about honest business practices. Word spread quickly. Miss Hart wasn't decorative, she wasn't soft. She wasn't someone you could intimidate or charm or dismiss. She was grudgingly someone who might actually know what she was doing. By the end of the first week, the open hostility had faded to mere skepticism. Men still didn't go out of their way to be friendly, but they stopped actively resisting her authority. They answered her questions. They followed her directions. They stopped testing every single boundary. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't even respect yet. But it was the beginning of something workable. Martha noticed the shift. You're doing better than I expected. Most women would have broken by now, or at least cried a few times in private. I've cried, Evelyn admitted. In my room, at night, where no one can see. Smart. Crying's not weakness, but showing it to these men would be. They'd use it against you. Martha handed her the latest supply ledger. You're learning fast. Another few weeks and you won't need me hovering over you constantly. I'll always need you. You know things I'll never know. Maybe, but you're picking up the important parts quicker than I thought possible. Caleb chose well. It was the closest thing to approval Martha had given. Evelyn didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded and went back to work. That evening, Rourke summoned her to his office. She'd barely seen him all week. He'd been dealing with the water rights dispute with the neighboring ranch, which apparently was escalating from legal posturing to actual threats. When she entered, he looked even more tired than usual, his eyes shadowed and his jaw tight. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Evelyn sat. Is something wrong? Define wrong. The Miller Ranch is threatening to dam the river upstream, which would cut off our water supply. My lawyer says we have legal grounds to stop them, but legal processes take time we don't have. If they dam that river before we get a court order, half our cattle will die of thirst before we can fight it. He rubbed his face. I might have to handle this the old-fashioned way. Which means riding over there with enough men to make them reconsider. Not violence, necessarily, just a show of force, making it clear that damming that river would be a very bad decision for everyone involved. That sounds dangerous. It is, but so is letting them choke off our water. He leaned back in his chair. I'll be gone for at least 2 days, maybe 3. Garrett will handle ranch operations while I'm away. You'll handle everything else. Think you're ready for that? Evelyn's stomach tightened. No, but I'll do it anyway. Good answer. He pulled out a ledger and slid it across the desk. Emergency protocols. If something goes seriously wrong while I'm gone, fire, major injury, anything catastrophic, these are the steps to follow. Read it tonight. Memorize it. Hope you never need it. When are you leaving? Dawn tomorrow, taking 12 men. The best fighters, unfortunately, which means you'll be short-handed for anything that requires muscle. He studied her. You've done well this week, better than I expected. The men are starting to accept you. Don't waste that progress while I'm gone. Stay firm. Stay consistent. And don't let anyone take advantage of my absence to undermine your authority. I won't. I know. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day for both of us. Evelyn took the ledger and left, her mind already racing through everything that could go wrong in Rourke's absence. She spent half the night reading the emergency protocols, committing procedures to memory, trying not to imagine scenarios that would require using them. Morning came too fast. She watched from her window as Rourke and 12 men rode out, armed and grim-faced. They disappeared into the distance, leaving the ranch feeling oddly empty despite the 30-odd people still working. The first day without Rourke passed without incident. The second day brought a surprise inspection from a territorial livestock agent, which Evelyn handled by pulling out meticulously organized records and answering every question with documentation. The agent left impressed, commenting that most ranches he visited were nowhere near as well managed. The third day brought Thomas Greer. He arrived mid-afternoon in a fancy wagon pulled by matched horses, dressed in clothes too fine for frontier travel. Mid-40s, handsome in a polished way that suggested he'd never done hard labor in his life. He approached the main house like he owned it, his smile confident and his manner easy. Martha met him at the door, her expression immediately suspicious. Can I help you? I'm here to see Caleb Rourke. Business matter, time sensitive. Mr. Rourke isn't available. You can leave a message or come back next week. Not available? Where is he? That's not your concern. Greer's smile tightened. I've ridden 3 days to get here. I'm not leaving without speaking to someone in authority. If Rourke isn't here, who's in charge? Evelyn stepped out of the house before Martha could respond. I am. What do you want? Greer looked her up and down, his expression shifting from confidence to barely concealed contempt. And who exactly are you? Evelyn Hart. I manage household operations and handle Mr. Rourke's affairs in his absence. State your business. My business is with Rourke, not his housekeeper. Then you'll have to wait until he returns. Good day. Evelyn started to turn away. Wait. Greer's voice hardened. I'm not some traveling salesman you can dismiss. I represent the Territorial Land Development Company. We have a legal claim on a section of Rourke's northern pasture, and I'm here to negotiate compensation for his illegal use of our property. The Rourke Ranch owns that land outright. Has for 15 years. There's no legal claim. That's not what our records show. Greer pulled papers from his coat. We have documentation proving that land was never properly transferred, which means Caleb Rourke has been grazing cattle on property that doesn't belong to him. We're willing to settle this quietly, but we need someone authorized to negotiate. Evelyn took the papers and scanned them quickly. They looked official, stamps, signatures, legal language. But something felt wrong. The dates were inconsistent. The land description didn't quite match. These documents are fraudulent, she said. Greer's face flushed. Excuse me? The land description references boundary markers that didn't exist until 1862. These documents are supposedly from 1860. Either someone made a mistake or someone's trying to run a con. My guess is the latter. You're calling me a liar? I'm calling these documents suspicious. Mr. Rourke will review them when he returns. If they're legitimate, he'll address them properly. If they're not, you'll leave and not come back. Either way, this conversation is over. She handed the papers back. Martha, please show Mr. Greer out. Greer didn't move. You're making a mistake. The Territorial Land Development Company has significant resources. We can make life very difficult for this ranch. And Mr. Rourke has significant resources too, plus a very good lawyer and a reputation for not tolerating fraud. Try to intimidate him if you want, but don't waste time trying to intimidate me. I'm not impressed. For a moment, Greer looked like he might argue further. Then his expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Caleb Rourke isn't here to protect you, Miss Hart. You might want to remember that before you make enemies you can't handle. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. He tipped his hat mockingly. I'll be back, with or without Rourke's cooperation. He climbed into his wagon and left, the matched horses kicking up dust as they departed. Evelyn watched until he disappeared, her heart hammering. Martha appeared at her elbow. That was dangerous. Men like Greer don't forgive being called frauds in front of witnesses. He is a fraud. Those documents were fake. Probably, but proving it is Caleb's job, not yours. You should have been more diplomatic. Diplomatic means he'd think I was weak. Weak means he'd come back with more threats and bigger demands. I shut it down before it could escalate. Evelyn turned toward the house. Besides, I wasn't lying. Those dates were wrong. Anyone who actually looked at the documents would see it. And if you're wrong, if those documents are somehow legitimate and you just made an enemy of a powerful development company, then I'll deal with the consequences when they come. But that night, alone in her room, Evelyn wasn't nearly as confident as she'd sounded. What if she'd been wrong? What if those documents were real and she'd just created a massive legal problem for Rourke? What if Greer came back with enforcers or lawyers or worse? She pulled out the papers she'd copied before Greer left. She'd had Martha quietly make duplicates while she'd kept him distracted with conversation. She reviewed them again, checking dates, cross-referencing with the ranch's own land records that she'd memorized over the past week. No, she'd been right. The dates were wrong. The boundary descriptions didn't match. Someone had created these documents recently, trying to make them look old, and they'd made mistakes in the details. This was a con. A sophisticated one, but still a con. And Evelyn had just made it clear that the Rourke Ranch wasn't an easy target. Whether that would stop Greer or just make him more determined remained to be seen. Rourke returned late the following evening, looking exhausted but satisfied. The water rights dispute had been resolved, through intimidation and negotiation in equal measure. The Miller Ranch had backed down from their damming plans in exchange for a formal easement agreement that benefited both properties. Evelyn met him in his office and told him everything about Greer's visit. She handed over the copied documents and explained her analysis. Rourke listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You handled that exactly right. Those documents are fake. I can tell just from the paper quality. which is too new to match the dates they're claiming. Greer was testing us, seeing if we'd panic or negotiate out of fear. You called his bluff. That was the right move. Relief flooded through Evelyn's chest. I wasn't completely sure. Yes, you were. You just doubted yourself afterward. Don't. Trust your instincts. They're good. He set the documents aside. Anything else happen while I was gone? Minor things. Nothing I couldn't handle. Good. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the darkened ranch. I talked to some of the men earlier. They said you've been running things smoothly. No complaints. A few actually said you're easier to work with than Martha because you explain your reasoning instead of just giving orders. Martha has earned the right not to explain herself. I haven't. Maybe. But either way, you're doing well. Better than well. He turned back to her. I think it's time we made this arrangement official. Evelyn's breath caught. Official how? Marriage. Proper marriage. I know we said 2 months, but you've already proven you can do this job. Waiting longer doesn't change anything. Unless you need more time? Evelyn's mind raced. It had barely been 2 weeks. 2 weeks of exhaustion and crisis management and proving herself every single day. 2 weeks of slowly learning to navigate this strange new life. But Rourke was right. Waiting wouldn't change anything. She could do this work. She could handle this life. And delaying the decision just meant prolonging the uncertainty. No, she said finally. I don't need more time. If you're sure, then I'm sure. I'm sure. Rourke pulled open a desk drawer and retrieved a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band, worn but well maintained. This was my grandmother's. It's not fancy, but it's real. Will it do? Evelyn looked at the ring, her throat tight. It's perfect. Then we'll make it official. I'll send word to the circuit judge. He comes through every few weeks. Next time he's in the area, we'll have him perform the ceremony. Probably 3, maybe 4 weeks. All right. Rourke closed the box and set it on the desk between them. This doesn't change anything about how we work together. The arrangement stays the same, partnership, not romance. But legally, you'll have more authority, more protection, and more stake in making this ranch successful. I understand. He nodded once, then gestured toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another full day. Evelyn left. The image of that simple gold band burned into her mind. In a few weeks, she'd be married. Officially, legally bound to this place, to this life, to this complicated man who'd chosen her when no one else would. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something close to calm certainty. This was right, not perfect, not romantic, not what she'd imagined as a girl, but right. Real, honest, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The weeks before the wedding passed in a strange blur of routine and anticipation. Evelyn fell into the rhythm of ranch life. Wake before dawn, coordinate breakfast for 40-plus men, handle the endless stream of decisions and crises that came with managing an operation this size, fall into bed exhausted every night. The work never stopped, never got easier. But she got better at it. The men's attitude toward her continued to shift, slowly but perceptibly. They still didn't invite her to their card games or include her in their rough camaraderie, but they stopped treating her like an unwelcome intrusion. When she gave instructions, they followed them without argument. When she asked questions, they answered honestly. When something broke or went wrong, they came to her first instead of waiting for Rourke or Garrett. It wasn't friendship, but it was functional respect, and that counted for more. Martha noticed it too. You've won them over. Well, she said one afternoon while they reviewed inventory. Took less time than I expected. I haven't won them over. They've just accepted that I'm not leaving. Same thing out here. These men don't waste energy fighting battles they can't win. You proved you could do the work, so they stopped fighting. Martha marked something in the ledger. That's more than most women in your position ever manage. Be proud of it. Evelyn didn't feel proud. She felt tired and uncertain and constantly aware that one major mistake could undo weeks of careful progress. But she kept those thoughts to herself and went back to work. Rourke remained distant in a way that felt deliberate. He was polite, professional, occasionally even warm when discussing ranch business. But he kept a careful space between them, No unnecessary conversations, no meals shared unless required, no moments of casual intimacy that might suggest their arrangement was anything more than practical partnership. Evelyn told herself she was fine with it. This was what she'd signed up for, what they'd both agreed to. But sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet and her mind wouldn't settle, she wondered what it would be like if things were different. If Rourke looked at her the way a man looked at a woman he'd chosen out of desire rather than necessity. If there was warmth behind his careful courtesy, if this marriage would ever be more than a business arrangement with legal documentation, then she'd remind herself that wanting things to be different was pointless. This was reality. She needed to accept it and stop wishing for romance that would never materialize. The circuit judge arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks and 4 days after Rourke's proposal. He was a weathered man in his 60s named Harrison, with a booming voice and an air of having seen everything the frontier could throw at him and remaining unimpressed. He'd known Rourke for years, apparently, and greeted him with the familiarity of old acquaintances. "So you're finally doing it again," Harrison said, looking between Rourke and Evelyn with open curiosity. "Thought you swore off marriage after the last disaster." "Things change. Miss Hart is different from my previous wives." "I can see that. She's older, for one thing. Has some spine to her from what I hear around the territory." Harrison turned to Evelyn. "You know what you're getting into, young lady?" "I'm hardly young, and yes, I know exactly what I'm getting into." "Good, because Caleb Rourke is about as romantic as a fence post and twice as stubborn. If you're expecting moonlight and poetry, you're in for disappointment. I'm expecting hard work and honest partnership. That's all." Harrison laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling. "You'll do fine then. When do you want the ceremony?" "Tomorrow morning," Rourke said, "before the men start their workday. I want them all there as witnesses." "Public declaration, eh? Smart. Makes it harder for anyone to challenge the legitimacy later." Harrison pulled out a worn book from his saddlebag. "I'll need a few hours to review the legal requirements. Colorado Territory has specific rules about marriage contracts. You want a standard agreement or something custom?" "Standard is fine," Evelyn said before Rourke could answer. "We don't need complications." Rourke glanced at her but didn't contradict. "Standard works." That evening, Martha insisted on helping Evelyn prepare. "You need a proper dress. Not fancy, but proper. Clean, presentable. Something that says you take this seriously. I only have 2 dresses, and you've seen them both." "Then we'll alter one. Come on." Martha led her upstairs to a room Evelyn had never entered, a storage room filled with trunks and boxes. Martha dug through one trunk until she found what she was looking for. A dress in deep green wool, simple but well made, with minimal decoration. This was meant for Caleb's first wife. She died before she could wear it. It's been sitting here for 15 years. Might as well use it. Evelyn held the dress up. It was beautiful in its simplicity. No lace, no frills, just clean lines and quality fabric. "Are you sure? It seems wrong to wear something that belonged to her." "She's been dead 15 years. She doesn't need it. You do." Martha's voice was matter-of-fact. "Besides, she would have liked you. Sarah had no patience for helpless women. She would have appreciated someone practical." They spent the next hour altering the dress to fit Evelyn's frame, letting out the waist slightly, adjusting the shoulders, hemming the skirt. Martha worked with the efficiency of long practice, her needle flying through fabric while Evelyn stood still and tried not to think about the woman who'd died wearing Rourke's ring and carrying his child. "Did you know her well?" Evelyn asked finally. "Sarah?" "Well enough. She was young, only 22 when she married Caleb. Sweet girl. Strong, though. Had to be, to handle this life." Martha's hands didn't slow. She loved him completely, the kind of love that doesn't hold anything back, and he loved her the same way. Watching them together was like watching 2 halves of the same person. That must have made her death even harder. It destroyed him. For months he was like a ghost, went through the motions but wasn't really living. I thought he might not come back from it. Martha paused, her needle hovering. But he did. Eventually, he's not the same man he was before. That man died with Sarah. But he built something new out of what was left. Something harder, more resilient, less open to being hurt. And his second wife was a mistake from beginning to end. Rebecca married him thinking his money would make her happy. When she realized how hard ranch life actually was, she looked for happiness elsewhere. Caleb caught her trying to run off with a substantial amount of cash and his best riding horse. He could have had her arrested. Instead, he gave her enough money to start over somewhere else and made her promise never to come back. Martha resumed sewing. She wasn't a bad person, just wrong for this life, wrong for him. And what am I? Right for this life, right for him. Martha looked up, meeting Evelyn's eyes directly. You're practical. That's what he needs now. Not love, not passion, just someone competent and tough who won't break when things get hard. If you can be that, you'll do fine here. It wasn't exactly encouraging, but it was honest, and Evelyn appreciated honesty more than false comfort. The dress fit well enough when they finished. Evelyn studied herself in the mirror, a woman in her 30s, worn by life but not broken by it, wearing a dead woman's wedding dress. Not exactly the bridal image she'd imagined as a girl, but then again, nothing about this marriage matched what she'd imagined. Thank you, she said to Martha, for everything, not just the dress, for helping me survive these last few weeks. You survived on your own merit. I just showed you where things were kept. Martha collected her sewing supplies. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. But sleep didn't come easily. Evelyn lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions in her chest. Nervousness. Uncertainty. A strange kind of anticipation that wasn't quite excitement, but wasn't dread either. Tomorrow she'd marry a man she barely knew, commit herself legally and permanently to a life she was still learning to navigate. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt oddly calm, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Whether that was wisdom or delusion remained to be seen. Morning arrived with pale gray light and the sound of men beginning their workday. Evelyn dressed carefully in the green wool dress, pinned her hair into something approximating elegance, and went downstairs. Martha was already in the kitchen, overseeing breakfast preparations with Lucia and Carmen. The judge is ready whenever you are, Martha said. Caleb's already outside with the men. Evelyn's stomach flipped. Already? He's been up since before dawn. Nerves, probably, though he'd never admit it. Martha handed her a small bouquet of wildflowers. Nothing fancy, just whatever had been blooming near the house. These were Sarah's favorite. Seems appropriate. Evelyn took the flowers, their stems rough against her palm. Through the window, she could see the men gathered in the yard, more of them than usual. Apparently word had spread about the ceremony, and even the hands who didn't strictly need to be there had shown up. Rourke stood at the front, dressed in clothes slightly less worn than his usual work gear, his expression unreadable from this distance. Ready? Martha asked. No, but I'm going anyway. She walked outside into the cool morning air. The men parted to let her through, their faces curious but not hostile. A few nodded respectfully. One of the younger hands, the same one who'd asked her to fix the pump weeks ago, whispered, You look real nice, Miss Hart. Thank you, she said quietly. Rourke watched her approach, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Not quite warmth, not quite distance, something in between. When she reached him, he offered his hand and she took it, his palm rough and steady against hers. Judge Harrison stood before them, his book open, his expression serious. We're gathered here this morning to witness the marriage of Caleb Rourke and Evelyn Hart. This is a legal and binding union under the laws of Colorado Territory. If anyone has objections, speak now or forever hold your peace. Silence. Evelyn half expected someone to object, to question why Rourke was marrying a woman so clearly beneath his station, to mock the obvious practicality of the arrangement. But the men remained quiet, watching with genuine interest rather than judgment. Harrison continued with the standard vows, his voice carrying across the yard. Evelyn repeated the words when prompted. Hearing her own voice sound strange and distant, Rourke's responses were steady, certain, without hesitation. Then came the rings. Rourke produced the simple gold band from his grandmother, the same one he'd shown Evelyn weeks ago. He slid it onto her finger with surprising gentleness, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her hand all along. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb, you may kiss your bride. Rourke hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to Evelyn's, brief, chaste, more formality than affection. But his hand tightened on hers for just a moment, and when he pulled back, there was something almost soft in his expression. The men erupted in applause and cheers. Not mocking, genuine. Several of them were grinning. Garrett stepped forward and clapped Rourke on the shoulder. Congratulations, boss. Didn't think you'd do it again, but I'm glad you did. Appreciate it, Rourke said. One by one, the men offered their congratulations. Some shook Evelyn's hand. Others just nodded respectfully. A few made jokes about Rourke finally getting someone to keep him in line. The atmosphere was surprisingly warm, celebratory even. When the crowd finally dispersed to return to work, Evelyn stood beside Rourke in the morning light, officially his wife, legally bound to this ranch and this life. It had taken less than 15 minutes to complete the transformation from Miss Hart to Mrs. Rourke. Well, Rourke said quietly, still holding her hand, that's done. Yes, that's done. You all right? I think so. Are you? He considered the question. I'm not sure. It's strange doing this again. Different from the first time. Different from the second time. I keep waiting to feel something specific, but mostly I just feel relieved. Relieved? That it's official. That you're legally protected now. That if something happens to me, you'll have claim to this place and won't be thrown off by distant relatives or business partners. He finally released her hand. Practical concerns, but important ones. Very romantic. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. I warned you I wasn't romantic. You did. I can't say I wasn't warned. They stood there for another moment, two people bound by law and necessity, trying to figure out what came next. Then Rourke straightened, the moment of vulnerability passing. I have work to do, fence repairs on the south pasture. Probably won't be back until dinner. And I have supply inventories to finish. Right. So will... He trailed off, seeming uncertain for the first time since Evelyn had met him. We'll go back to our normal routines, Evelyn finished. Marriage doesn't change the work that needs doing. No, it doesn't. He nodded once, then walked away toward the stables, already calling orders to the men who'd handle the fence repairs. Evelyn watched him go, this man who was now legally her husband, and tried to sort through the complicated knot of feelings in her chest. Relief? Yes. Uncertainty? Definitely. But also something else, something that felt almost like belonging. She was Mrs. Caleb Rourke now, mistress of this ranch, not chosen by default or accepted out of pity, but selected deliberately by a man who'd seen her clearly and decided she was exactly what he needed. It wasn't love. It wasn't romance. But it was something real and honest and built on mutual respect. For now, that was enough. The days after the wedding settled into familiar patterns with one notable difference. Evelyn now wore a gold band on her finger that marked her status unmistakably. The men adjusted to calling her Mrs. Rourke instead of Miss Hart, though a few of the older hands still slipped up occasionally. She didn't correct them. Names were just names. What mattered was the work. And the work never stopped coming. A week after the wedding, Thomas Greer returned. This time he brought 3 men with him, tough-looking types who wore their weapons openly and watched the ranch with the calculating eyes of professional intimidators. Evelyn spotted them from the office window and immediately sent for Garrett. That's the fraud from last month, she told him. He's back with muscle. Get Mr. Rourke. Garrett took one look at the approaching wagon and swore. Boss is on the North Range, won't be back for hours. You want me to handle this? No, I'll handle it, but I want you and at least 6 men visible and armed. Not threatening, just present. Make it clear we're not intimidated. Garrett grinned. Yes, ma'am. By the time Greer's wagon pulled into the yard, 8 ranch hands were strategically positioned around the area, working on various tasks but clearly armed and clearly paying attention. Evelyn stepped out to meet Greer, Martha hovering protectively behind her. Greer climbed down from the wagon, his 3 men following. Mrs. Rourke, I believe it is now. Congratulations on your marriage. Thank you. State your business, Mr. Greer. Same business as before. The Territorial Land Development Company's claim on your northern pasture. We've come to a final resolution. Either Caleb Rourke pays us $20,000 in compensation for illegal use of our land, or we take the matter to territorial court. You have 1 week to decide. We've already decided. Those documents are fraudulent. We're not paying anything. Greer's expression hardened. I was hoping you'd be more reasonable after having time to consider, but it seems marriage hasn't softened you any. That's unfortunate. What's unfortunate is that you rode all the way out here thinking intimidation would work better the second time. It won't. Evelyn kept her voice level. Those documents have incorrect dates and boundary descriptions that don't match historical records. If you take this to court, we'll prove they're fake, and then you'll be facing charges for attempted fraud. Is that really what you want? You're bluffing. You don't have the resources to fight us in court. Actually, we do. Mr. Rourke has an excellent lawyer and enough money to drag this out for years if necessary. How much can your company afford to spend on a losing battle? She paused. Or maybe your company doesn't actually exist. Maybe this is just you and a few accomplices running a con on frontier ranchers who you think are too isolated to fight back. Either way, you're not getting a cent from us. One of Greer's men took a step forward, his hand moving toward his gun. Immediately, 3 ranch hands shifted position, their own weapons suddenly much more visible. The man froze. Greer held up a hand. Stand down. He looked at Evelyn with naked hostility. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Rourke. My company has dealt with stubborn ranchers before. It never ends well for them. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Accidents happen on the frontier. Fires, fence cutting, cattle stampedes. Would be a shame if this lovely ranch suffered some unfortunate incidents. Evelyn felt ice slide down her spine, but she kept her expression neutral. And it would be a shame if anything happened to you or your men on your way back to wherever you came from. The frontier is dangerous. Bandits, wild animals, accidents. You should be careful. It was a bold play, matching his threat with one of her own. Risky, but backing down now would only invite more aggression. Greer stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. You've got nerve, I'll give you that. But nerve only gets you so far. We'll be back. And next time, we won't be nearly so polite. Next time, bring better documents. And maybe don't bring thugs who telegraph their intentions so obviously. It's insulting to everyone's intelligence. Greer's face flushed red. He climbed back into his wagon without another word, his men following. They left in a cloud of dust and barely contained rage. When they were gone, Evelyn's legs nearly gave out. She'd been running on pure adrenaline, and now that the threat had passed, the fear caught up with her all at once. Martha grabbed her elbow, steadying her. That was either very brave or very stupid, Martha said quietly. Probably both. Garrett approached, his expression serious. You handled that well, ma'am. But Greer's not done. Men like that don't take humiliation lightly. He'll come back, and next time he'll be more dangerous. I know. We need to send word to Mr. Rourke. He should know what's happening. Already sent someone. Boss should be back within the hour. Garrett hesitated. If it comes to real trouble, you need to stay in the house. Let us handle it. That's what we're here for. I appreciate that, but if Greer targets this ranch, it won't be just you he's after. It'll be all of us. I need to be ready to defend myself in this place just like everyone else. You know how to shoot? I told Mr. Rourke I could shoot. I didn't say how well. Then we're fixing that. Today. Soon as the boss gets back and we get this sorted, you're learning proper firearms handling. Can't have the boss's wife unable to defend herself. It was the first time anyone had referred to her safety as important in its own right, not just as an extension of Rourke's property. Evelyn felt something warm and unexpected in her chest. Thank you, Garrett. Just practical, ma'am. You're one of us now. We take care of our own. Rourke returned within the hour, riding hard and looking grim. Evelyn met him in the yard and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing progressively darker. He threatened you directly? Rourke's voice was dangerously quiet. He threatened the ranch. I just happened to be the one standing there. Same thing. Rourke dismounted and handed his horse to one of the hands. "Garrett, double the watch tonight. I want men on rotation around the clock. Anyone sees anything suspicious, they raise the alarm immediately. No one goes anywhere alone until this is resolved." "Yes, boss." Rourke turned to Evelyn. "Inside, now." She followed him into the house, into his office. He closed the door firmly and then just stood there, his hands clenched into fists, visibly trying to control his anger. "I should have been here," he said finally. "You shouldn't have had to face that alone." "I wasn't alone. Garrett and the men were right there. That's not the same as me being here to handle it myself." "Why? Because you're my husband now and supposed to protect me?" Evelyn kept her voice gentle but firm. "That's not how this arrangement works. You said yourself we're partners. Partners handle things when the other isn't available. That's what I did. You could have been hurt, but I wasn't, and neither was anyone else. I made the right call, Caleb. You know I did." It was the first time she'd used his first name. It felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way their relationship wasn't, but also right somehow. They were married now, partners. Using formality felt wrong in this moment. Rourke looked at her, really looked at her, and some of the anger drained from his expression. "You're right. You handled it well. Better than I would have, probably. I would have lost my temper and made things worse." He sank into his desk chair. "But I don't like you being put in danger because of me. Because of this ranch. Then we'll make sure it doesn't happen again. We'll document everything about Greer's visits, get your lawyer involved, maybe even contact the territorial authorities. Make it clear that any further harassment will have legal consequences." That's assuming Greer cares about legal consequences. Men who make threats like that usually don't. Then we prepare for the possibility that he'll follow through, increase security, make sure everyone knows to watch for trouble. And if it comes to a fight, we fight smart, not angry. Rourke studied her in silence for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not much of one, just a slight curve of his mouth, but genuine. "You really are perfect for this, aren't you? Most women would be terrified. You're already planning strategy. Most women haven't been rejected 7 times and traveled 3 days into the wilderness to marry a stranger. I stopped being easily terrified a while ago." "Good, because I have a feeling things are about to get complicated." He stood and moved to the window, looking out over the ranch. "Greer's not working alone. The Territorial Land Development Company is real. I've heard of them. They buy up questionable land claims and then pressure current occupants into paying settlements rather than fighting in court. Usually they target smaller operations that can't afford legal battles. They must be getting desperate if they're going after us. Or confident. Maybe they think your reputation isn't enough to protect you anymore. Maybe. Either way, we need to be ready." He turned back to her. "Garrett mentioned teaching you to shoot properly. That's a good idea. Starting tomorrow, you practice daily until you're competent. I want you able to defend yourself if necessary." "All right." "And Evelyn?" He used her first name deliberately, matching her earlier intimacy. "Thank you for handling this, for not panicking, for being exactly what I needed when I wasn't here. That's what partners do." "Yes, it is." He held her gaze for a moment longer, something unspoken passing between them. Then he broke eye contact and moved toward the door. "I need to meet with Garrett and plan security rotations. You should probably get some rest. Today's been stressful enough." But Evelyn didn't rest. She spent the afternoon reviewing every document related to the ranch's land ownership, cross-referencing boundaries and dates, building a comprehensive file that would destroy Greer's claims if it ever came to court. She worked methodically, her hands steady, even though her mind kept replaying Greer's threats. Fires, fence cutting, cattle stampedes. She'd handled the confrontation well in the moment, but now that the adrenaline had faded, the fear settled in. This wasn't just about protecting herself anymore. It was about protecting everyone here. The men who'd started to accept her, Martha and Lucia and Carmen, the ranch itself. Everything she'd begun to build could be destroyed if she made the wrong move. That night she lay in bed listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into darkness. Somewhere outside, men walked patrol routes, watching for threats. In the room down the hall, Rourke was presumably dealing with his own sleeplessness. The house felt different now, Not just a place she worked, but a place she needed to defend. A place that had somehow become home. When had that happened? When had she stopped seeing this as a temporary arrangement and started seeing it as permanent? As hers to protect? She didn't know, but she knew with absolute certainty that she wasn't giving it up without a fight. If Greer wanted a battle, he'd get one. And he'd learn what Evelyn Rourke, was capable of when pushed too far. She'd been overlooked and dismissed her entire life. She'd been too old, too plain, too difficult. But she was done being invisible. Done accepting whatever scraps the world offered. This ranch, this life, this strange partnership marriage. They were hers now. Legally, officially, completely hers. And she'd be damned if she let anyone take them away. The attack came 3 nights later, just after midnight when most of the ranch was deep in sleep. Evelyn woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of men shouting. She was out of bed and pulling on clothes before her mind fully caught up with what was happening. Fire. She yanked open her door and nearly collided with Rourke in the hallway, already dressed, a rifle in his hands. "Stay in the house here," he ordered, his voice hard. "Like hell, where's the fire? Eastern Barn could be accident, could be Greer. Either way, I need you safe. And I need to help. That's our grain storage. If it goes, we lose half our winter supplies." She pushed past him toward the stairs. "I'm not hiding while the ranch burns." She heard him curse behind her, but he didn't try to stop her again. They burst out of the house together into chaos. The Eastern Barn was fully engulfed, flames climbing into the night sky, sparks spiraling upward like angry stars. Men were already forming bucket lines from the creek, throwing water that seemed pathetically inadequate against the inferno. "Forget the barn!" Rourke's voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. "It's gone. Wet down the surrounding buildings so the fire doesn't spread. Move!" The men shifted immediately, redirecting their efforts to the structures closest to the burning barn. Evelyn joined the bucket line without thinking, her hands blistering almost immediately from the rough rope handles. Pass, dip, over and over, until her arms screamed and her lungs burned from smoke inhalation. Garrett appeared beside Rourke, soot-stained and breathing hard. "Found accelerant marks on the north side." This was deliberate. "And boss, 3 horses are missing from the stable. Good ones." Rourke's expression went deadly. "Greer. Has to be. This is too coordinated to be random. Then he's declaring war." Rourke turned to scan the darkness beyond the firelight. "Double the guards on the remaining buildings. He hit us once tonight. He might try again. And get someone tracking those horses at first light. I want to know which direction they went." The night stretched into brutal hours of fighting the fire, watching the barn collapse into itself in a shower of sparks and burning timber, desperately protecting everything else from the same fate. By the time dawn broke gray and cold, the Eastern Barn was nothing but smoking ruins, but the surrounding structures had been saved. 3 horses were gone, along with grain stores worth at least $2,000 and irreplaceable equipment. Evelyn sat on the ground near the creek, her hands raw and bleeding, her dress ruined, her face covered in soot. Around her, exhausted men were collapsing where they stood, too tired to even make it back to the bunkhouses. The smell of smoke was everywhere, thick and acrid. Rourke found her there and dropped down beside her without a word. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him, filthy, exhausted, his eyes red from smoke. For a long moment, they just sat together in silence, watching the sun climb higher over a landscape that looked like a battlefield. "You should have stayed in the house," he said, finally, his voice rough. "You should have known I wouldn't." "Yeah, I should have." He looked at her hands, at the blisters and burns. "Martha needs to treat those." "Martha needs to treat everyone. I'll wait my turn. You're my wife. You go first." "I'm also part of this operation. Same rules apply to me as everyone else." She flexed her fingers, wincing. "We lost a lot tonight. We lost things. Things can be replaced. No one died. That's what matters. Greer won't stop." "No, he won't." Rourke's jaw tightened. "But neither will I. This just went from business to personal." Over the next week, Rourke's lawyer arrived from Denver, a sharp-eyed man named Morrison, who spent 3 days reviewing every document related to the ranch's land ownership and Greer's claims. His conclusion was exactly what Evelyn had suspected. Greer's documents were sophisticated forgeries, probably created within the last 6 months, designed to prey on ranchers who wouldn't have the resources to fight back legally. The good news, Morrison said, spreading papers across Rourke's desk, is that we can prove fraud definitively. The bad news is that the Territorial Land Development Company is a shell corporation with no real assets. Even if we win in court, collecting damages will be nearly impossible. I don't care about damages, Rourke said coldly. I care about making sure Greer faces consequences. Then we file criminal charges, fraud, arson, theft. I'll coordinate with the Territorial Marshal's office, but Caleb, you need to be prepared for this to take time. The legal system moves slowly. How slowly? Months, maybe longer, and Greer knows that. He's counting on you either paying him off to make it go away or giving up because the legal battle costs too much. He's wrong on both counts. Rourke looked at Evelyn, who'd been sitting quietly through the meeting. What do you think? It still surprised her when he asked for her opinion in front of others, but she'd learned to trust that he meant it genuinely. I think we need to do more than just react. Greer's strategy relies on us being isolated and defensive. We should flip that. Go on the offensive. How? Information. Greer's probably running the same con on other ranchers. If we can find them, coordinate with them, we present a unified front. Suddenly, he's not fighting one wealthy rancher. He's fighting a coalition with shared legal resources and coordinated strategy. Morrison looked impressed. That's actually brilliant. Multiple plaintiffs make the case stronger and spread the legal costs. It also draws territorial attention to the pattern of fraud, which puts pressure on law enforcement to act faster. How do we find the other targets? Rourke asked. Court records, Evelyn said. Land office filings. Anyone who's had similar claims filed against them in the last year or two. It'll take research, but it's doable. I can handle that, Morrison said, already making notes. Give me 2 weeks. I'll identify every rancher in the territory who's dealt with the Territorial Land Development Company and reach out to them. Do it, Rourke said. And Morrison, make sure Greer knows we're coming for him. I want him nervous. After Morrison left to begin his research, Evelyn and Rourke remained in the office. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with everything that had happened over the past weeks. You're good at this, Rourke said finally. Strategy, seeing the bigger picture. I knew you could manage household operations. I didn't expect you to be this good at the business side too. My father taught me to think systematically. Every problem has a solution if you break it down properly and look at it from all angles. Most people panic when someone burns down their barn. You started planning counterattacks. Panicking doesn't rebuild barns or catch criminals. Action does. She paused. Are you surprised that I'm not falling apart? No, I'm relieved and grateful. He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the ruins of the eastern barn. I need to tell you something about Sarah. Evelyn's breath caught. He'd never voluntarily brought up his first wife before. All right. Martha probably told you we were completely in love. That's true. What she didn't tell you is that Sarah died because I wasn't prepared. The midwife was supposed to come when the baby was due, but labor started early. I had to ride for help while Sarah was alone, terrified, in pain. By the time I got back with the midwife, it was too late. Both of them were gone. His voice stayed level, but his hands were clenched white-knuckled against the window frame. I wasn't prepared. I didn't have backup plans or contingencies. I thought love would be enough to protect her. I was wrong. Caleb, I'm telling you this because I need you to understand why I am the way I am now, why I plan for every contingency, why I need people around me who can handle crises without falling apart. It's not just about the ranch. It's about making sure I'm never that unprepared again, never that helpless. Evelyn stood and moved to stand beside him. You can't prepare for everything. Some things just happen, no matter how careful you are. I know, but I can try. And having you here, having someone who thinks like you do, who doesn't panic, who can handle things when I can't be everywhere at once, it makes the trying feel less futile. Is that what I am to you? A contingency plan? He finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. At first, yes. That's what I thought I needed. Someone competent and practical who could fill the gaps in my operation. But you're more than that now. What am I now? I don't know yet. I'm still figuring it out. He turned back to the window. But I know I'm glad you're here. Not just because you're useful. Because you're you. Auris asechimars saying. It wasn't a declaration of love, it wasn't romance or poetry or any of the things young girls dreamed about, but it was honest and real, and coming from Caleb Rourke, it meant more than flowery words from someone else ever could. I'm glad I'm here too, Evelyn said quietly. Even with the barn burning and the threats and everything else. I'm glad. Morrison worked quickly. Within 2 weeks, he'd identified 7 other ranchers who'd been targeted by the Territorial Land Development Company with similar fraudulent claims. 3 had paid settlements rather than fight. 4 were still resisting but struggling with the legal costs. All of them were willing to join forces once they understood the pattern. The coalition met at the Rourke Ranch on a cold afternoon in early November. Evelyn helped Martha prepare food and coffee for the gathering, then joined the men in Rourke's office where they spread maps and documents across every available surface. Morrison presented the evidence systematically: the pattern of fraud, the shell company structure, the coordinated timing of claims designed to pressure multiple targets simultaneously. As he talked, Evelyn watched the other ranchers' expressions shift from skepticism to anger to grim determination. "So what's the plan?" asked Reynolds, a grizzled rancher from the Eastern Territory. "We all file charges and hope the marshal cares enough to act?" "We do more than that," Morrison said. "We file a joint civil suit for damages and criminal complaints for organized fraud. We present evidence to the territorial governor's office showing a pattern of criminal activity that threatens land stability across the entire region. We make this too big and too public for law enforcement to ignore." "That'll take months," another rancher protested. "What do we do in the meantime while Greer's still out there causing problems?" Rourke spoke up. "We protect each other. Share information. If Greer hits one of us, we all respond. He can't intimidate 7 ranches working together the way he can intimidate 1 working alone." "United front," Evelyn added. "That's what he's not expecting. He's counting on us being isolated and afraid. We prove we're neither." The men looked at her, some with surprise that she'd spoken up, others with grudging respect. Reynolds grinned. "I heard you fixed your own pump and handled Greer's threats without backing down. That true?" "It's true." "Then I'm inclined to listen to what you've got to say. What else you thinking, Mrs. Rourke?" "I'm thinking we document everything. Every interaction with Greer or his people. Every threat, every incident, every attempt at intimidation. Build a case so airtight that when law enforcement finally acts, there's no question about guilt. And if Greer escalates, if he gets violent, then we respond with overwhelming force," Rourke said flatly. "But we do it legally and defensibly. No revenge attacks, no vigilante justice. We defend what's ours, we protect each other, but we don't give Greer ammunition to paint us as the aggressors." The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, every rancher had committed to the coalition, signed documents authorizing Morrison to represent them jointly, and agreed to a system for sharing information and resources. It wasn't perfect, but it was solid. After the others left, Rourke pulled Evelyn aside. "That was good work today, getting them organized, keeping them focused. I couldn't have done that alone." "Yes, you could have. You just didn't have to because I was here. That's what partnership means, isn't it? Not having to do everything alone." "Yes, I think it is." He studied her for a moment, something shifting in his expression. "I'm starting to understand what this is, between us. It's not what I had with Sarah. That was young, and passionate, and all-consuming. This is different, quieter, built on respect and trust instead of romance. Is that enough for you?" "I think it might be better. What I had with Sarah was beautiful, but it made me vulnerable in ways I couldn't afford. This, what we have, makes me stronger. Makes both of us stronger." He paused. "Is it enough for you?" Evelyn considered the question honestly. When she'd first answered that advertisement, she'd been desperate for any chance at a different life. She hadn't dared hope for anything more than basic survival and tolerable companionship. But what she'd found here was so much more than that. Purpose, respect, a partnership that challenged her and valued her contributions. A place where she wasn't invisible or dismissed, but essential. Was it romance? No. Was it love? Maybe not in the traditional sense, but it was real. And it was hers. And that made it more precious than any fantasy. Yes, she said. It's enough. The territorial marshal arrived 2 weeks later with a warrant for Thomas Greer's arrest. Turns out the coalition's coordinated evidence had attracted attention at the highest levels of territorial government. The governor himself had ordered an investigation, and what they'd found was worse than anyone expected. Greer wasn't just running land fraud schemes. He was part of a larger criminal network involved in everything from cattle rustling to claim jumping to outright extortion. The Territorial Land Development Company was just one of several shell corporations he used to legitimize illegal activities. When the marshal's deputies raided Greer's base of operations in Denver, they found detailed records of his schemes, including plans to escalate violence against ranchers who resisted, arson, sabotage, even murder for hire. The Rourke Ranch barn burning had been just the beginning of what Greer had planned. "You saved lives by organizing that coalition," the marshal told Rourke and Evelyn in their office. "If you'd fought this alone, Greer would have escalated until someone got killed. By bringing everyone together, you forced our hand to act faster, and you made yourselves too visible a target for him to risk more violence." "What happens to him now?" Evelyn asked. "Trial. Probably multiple trials for multiple crimes across the territory. He's looking at decades in prison, assuming he's convicted, which he will be based on the evidence." The marshal tipped his hat. "You folks did good work. The territory owes you thanks." After he left, Evelyn and Rourke stood together in the quiet office, processing what they'd just been told. It was over. The threat was gone. Greer was in custody, his organization dismantled, his schemes exposed. They'd won. "We should celebrate," Rourke said. "Something. I don't know what. I'm not good at celebrations." "Neither am I," Evelyn admitted. "Maybe we just acknowledge that we survived something hard and came through it stronger." "That works." He moved to the desk and pulled out a ledger. "Speaking of which, I need to show you something. I've been tracking ranch finances, including household operations, since you took over. Want to see the results?" Evelyn joined him at the desk. The ledger showed detailed comparisons between the previous year's expenses and the current year's. Under Evelyn's management, household costs had decreased by 18%, while efficiency had improved measurably. Waste was down. Supply ordering was more strategic. Staff coordination was smoother. "You've saved this ranch almost $10,000 in the last few months," Rourke said. "And that's not counting the indirect benefits of better organization and improved morale. The men work better when things run smoothly. They're more productive, less prone to mistakes. I was just doing the job you hired me for. You were doing it exceptionally well, and I want to make sure you're compensated fairly." He pulled out another document. "I've set up a separate account in your name. 10% of ranch profits go directly to you, independent of household wages. That money is yours to use however you want. Save it, invest it, spend it, I don't care. But it's yours legally and completely." Evelyn stared at the document. 10% of ranch profits would be substantial, enough to make her independently wealthy over time, enough that she'd never be dependent on anyone's charity or tolerance ever again. "Why?" she asked. "Because you've earned it. Because you're my partner in this operation, not just an employee. And because if something happens to me, I want you protected. The ranch itself goes to you in my will, but this gives you liquid assets immediately." He paused. "Also because you deserve to have something that's completely yours, something you built through your own work." Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to cry, but her voice came out rough anyway. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "I think I have some idea." He closed the ledger. "You came here with nothing, just a carpet bag and 7 rejections and more determination than most people ever manage. You've built yourself into someone essential to this entire operation. That deserves recognition." The winter months that followed were the busiest Evelyn had ever experienced. The eastern barn needed rebuilding, which required coordinating supplies, workers, and scheduling around weather. The coalition of ranchers continued meeting monthly to share information and coordinate on territorial issues, and Evelyn found herself taking on more responsibilities as word spread about her organizational abilities. Other ranchers started coming to her with questions about household management, supply coordination, record keeping. She found herself inadvertently becoming a resource for the entire region, teaching other ranch wives and managers the systems she'd developed, sharing knowledge about efficient operations. It felt good, useful, like she was building something bigger than just the Rourke Ranch. One evening in late February, almost 6 months after her arrival, Evelyn sat in the household office reviewing supply orders when Rourke appeared in the doorway. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Of course." He came in and sat across from her, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I've been thinking about this arrangement we have, about us." Evelyn's heart jumped. "All right. When I married you, I told you this was a practical partnership. No romance, no expectations of affection, just mutual benefit and respect." "I remember." "I need to revise that statement." He leaned forward, his dark eyes intent. "Because somewhere along the way, it stopped being just practical. You're not just someone who helps run my ranch. You're someone I trust completely, someone I respect more than almost anyone I've ever known, someone whose opinion matters to me more than it probably should. Caleb, let me finish. I'm not good at this, so I need to get it out." He took a breath. "I don't love you the way I loved Sarah. That kind of all-consuming passion died with her. But what I feel for you is different. Deeper in some ways, more solid, built on actually knowing who you are and choosing you anyway, not just being swept up in romance." Evelyn's throat tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this partnership has become more than I expected, and I want you to know that. I want you to know that when I look at you, I don't see convenience or necessity. I see someone I genuinely want in my life, someone who makes everything better just by being here." It wasn't poetry. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was honest and real and completely him. "I feel the same way," Evelyn said quietly. "When I came here, I was just trying to survive, trying to find a place where I wouldn't be invisible or dismissed. But you saw me, really saw me, and you gave me the chance to become more than I thought I could be. That's worth more than romance ever could be." "So we're agreed? This is more than just a practical arrangement?" "Yes. This is more." Rourke smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, the kind she'd only seen a handful of times. "Good, because I've gotten used to having you around. Would hate to think it was just business." "It was never just business." "Not really." "No, I suppose it wasn't." He stood and offered his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. For a moment they stood there, hands clasped, looking at each other with new understanding. Then Rourke did something he'd never done before. He pulled her into an embrace. Nothing passionate, just steady and warm and reassuring. Evelyn leaned into it, resting her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. This was what they'd built. Not romance, not passion, but something real and lasting and strong enough to weather whatever came next. And that was more than enough. By the time spring arrived, bringing green grass and longer days and the promise of new beginnings, the Rourke Ranch had been transformed. The eastern barn stood rebuilt, better than before. The household ran with smooth efficiency. The coalition of ranchers had grown to include 12 operations working together, and Evelyn had become not just accepted but respected throughout the territory. She stood one morning on the porch of the main house, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the mountains. 6 months ago, she'd been standing on a selection platform, invisible and rejected, preparing to disappear into another nameless town. Now she was standing in front of a home she'd helped build, married to a man who valued her, essential to an operation that spanned thousands of acres. The transformation still stunned her sometimes. Rourke joined her on the porch, his own coffee steaming in the cool morning air. "What are you thinking about?" "How far I've come. How different everything is from what I expected." "Better or worse?" "Better. Definitely better." She glanced at him. "Though it's strange. I spent years wanting someone to choose me because I was desirable or lovable or special. Turns out what I actually needed was someone to choose me because I was useful and competent and strong. You're all of those things. Useful, competent, strong. But you're also more than that. He set his coffee down and turned to face her fully. You're the reason this ranch is thriving instead of just surviving. You're the reason I'm not carrying everything alone anymore. You're the reason I remember what it's like to have a partner I actually trust. That goes both ways. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You saw something in me that I'd stopped seeing in myself. I saw what was always there. You just needed the right circumstances to show it. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the ranch wake up. Men emerging from bunkhouses, horses being led to pasture, the daily rhythm of life beginning again. Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, desperate, invisible, rejected. That woman would barely recognize who she'd become. Stronger, more confident, essential instead of expendable. The journey had been brutal at times, terrifying, exhausting. But every challenge had stripped away another layer of self-doubt, revealed another reserve of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She'd been rejected 7 times before Caleb Rourke looked past every beautiful woman on that platform and chose her. At the time, it had felt like a last resort. Desperation meeting necessity. Now she understood it for what it really was. The right person seeing her clearly and recognizing exactly what they both needed. Not romance, not rescue, but partnership. Real, honest, built on mutual respect partnership. And that had transformed everything. I need to tell you something, Evelyn said, setting down her own coffee. I'm planning to start a project, something for the community. What kind of project? A school. There are at least 20 children scattered across the ranches in this area with no access to education. I want to bring them together, teach them reading, writing, arithmetic, give them opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise. Rourke considered this. That's ambitious. Where would you hold classes? I was thinking we could build a small schoolhouse near the property line, close to the main road. Make it accessible to families from multiple ranches. I teach in the mornings before household duties. It wouldn't be fancy, but it would be something. You've already thought this through completely, haven't you? Of course. I don't propose ideas I haven't planned thoroughly. He smiled. I know. That's one of the things I value about you. All right. Build your school. I'll cover construction costs and supplies. You handle everything else. Just like that? You're not going to argue that it'll take time away from ranch management? You've proven you can handle both ranch management and additional responsibilities. Besides, this is important. Education matters. And if my wife wants to build a school, she builds a school. He paused. Though I reserve the right to say I told you so when you're exhausted from managing 2 operations at once. Fair enough? The school became reality by midsummer, a simple 1-room building with benches, a blackboard, and books ordered from Denver. Evelyn taught 15 children that first session, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Some could barely read. Others were hungry for knowledge they'd never had access to before. She loved it. Loved watching children's faces light up when they understood something new. Loved giving them tools to build better futures. Loved creating something that would outlast her. The other ranch wives helped when they could, providing supplies, bringing children to classes, assisting with lessons when Evelyn needed extra hands. What had started as one woman's project became a community effort, and the children thrived. By the end of that first summer, even the youngest students could read simple texts and write their names. The older ones were tackling more complex material, learning skills that would serve them for life. Evelyn stood in the schoolhouse one afternoon after classes had ended, straightening benches and cleaning the blackboard. Through the window, she could see Rourke riding in from the north pasture, silhouetted against the setting sun. He'd kept his promise about the school the same way he kept all his promises, completely and without hesitation. He'd built the structure himself with help from the ranch hands. He'd ordered books without questioning the expense. He'd defended her decision when other ranchers questioned whether education was really necessary for frontier children, because he trusted her judgment, because he believed in what she was building, because they were partners in every sense that mattered. Later that evening, after dinner, Evelyn and Rourke sat together in his office reviewing the week's business. It had become their routine. End of each week, they went over everything together, making decisions jointly, planning for the week ahead. "The Miller Ranch wants to join the coalition," Rourke said, marking something in a ledger. "Ironic, considering we nearly went to war with them over water rights last year. People change. Circumstances change. Besides, having them in the coalition strengthens everyone." "Agreed. I'll tell them yes." He closed the ledger and looked at her. "You know what occurred to me today?" "What?" "It's been almost a year since I rode into Clemson's Ridge looking for a wife. Feels like longer somehow. Feels like less to me, like I just got here and suddenly everything's different. Everything is different. The ranch is more profitable, better organized, more stable, and He paused, searching for words. "I'm better, less angry, less isolated, more like the person I was before everything went wrong." "You did that yourself. I just helped." "No, you did more than help. You reminded me what it's like to have someone I can actually rely on. Someone who doesn't need managing or protecting or fixing, someone who just handles things." He reached across the desk and took her hand. "Thank you for that. You don't need to thank me for being your partner. That's just what this is." "Maybe, but I'm grateful anyway." They sat there for a moment, hands clasped across the desk, the easy silence of two people who'd learned to work together so smoothly they didn't need constant words. This was what they'd built, not the passionate romance of his youth, not the desperate bargain of her rejection years, but something solid and real and completely their own. A partnership built on mutual respect, a marriage built on honest acknowledgement of what each of them needed and could provide. A life built through shared effort and determination. It wasn't perfect. They still had disagreements, still got exhausted, still faced challenges that seemed overwhelming, but they faced them together. And that made all the difference. 2 years after Evelyn's arrival, the Rourke Ranch had become the most successful operation in 3 territories. The school had expanded to include 30 students and 2 additional teachers. The coalition of ranchers had grown to encompass 18 operations working together to improve conditions across the region. And Evelyn Hart Rourke, the woman who'd once been too old, too plain, too difficult for anyone to choose, had become one of the most respected figures in Colorado Territory. She stood at the anniversary celebration the ranch hands had organized, their idea, not hers, and looked around at everything that had been built. The rebuilt barn, the thriving household, the school in the distance, the men who'd once questioned her authority now raising glasses in her honor. Rourke stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. Not possessive, just present, supportive, partners in every way that mattered. "Speech!" someone called out. Others took up the chant. "Speech! Speech!" Evelyn had never been one for public speaking, but these were her people now, her ranch, her community. She owed them words. 2 years ago, she said, her voice carrying across the yard, I stood on a selection platform for the 7th time. 7 times rejected, 7 times told I wasn't good enough. Too old, too plain, too difficult. I'd started to believe they were right, that there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unworthy of being chosen. The yard had gone quiet. Every person present was listening. But then someone saw me differently, saw strength instead of stubbornness, saw competence instead of difficulty, saw potential instead of flaws. And that changed everything. Not because it magically fixed me. I wasn't broken. But because it gave me the chance to show what I was actually capable of when someone believed in me enough to let me try. She looked at Rourke, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I learned something important these past 2 years. Being chosen isn't about being perfect or beautiful or young. It's about being seen clearly by someone who values you for exactly who you are. And sometimes the person who chooses you isn't doing it out of romance or passion. They're doing it because they recognize in you the same determination and strength they carry in themselves. She turned back to the assembled crowd. All of you have become family to me. You gave me a chance when I desperately needed one. You let me prove myself instead of writing me off. You've become the community I never thought I'd find, so thank you for seeing me, for accepting me, for letting me be part of something bigger than myself. The applause was genuine and warm. Several of the men were grinning. Martha was dabbing at her eyes with her apron. Even the hardest, most skeptical hands looked touched. As the celebration continued around them, Rourke pulled Evelyn aside. That was a good speech. It was honest. The best ones usually are. He looked at her seriously. Do you have any regrets? About how this started? About choosing practical partnership over romance? Evelyn considered the question carefully. Did she regret that their marriage hadn't started with passion and declarations of love? That it had been built on necessity rather than desire? No, she said finally. Because what we built is stronger than romance ever could have been. Romance fades when reality hits. What we have gets stronger with every challenge we face together. I'll take that over pretty words and fleeting passion any day. Even though I'll never be able to give you the kind of love story other women have. You gave me something better. You gave me respect, trust, partnership, a place where I'm essential instead of tolerated, where I matter not because of what I look like or how old I am, but because of what I can do and who I am. She met his eyes. That's worth more than any love story. Rourke pulled her close, and this time when he kissed her, it wasn't the brief formality of their wedding. It was real and warm and full of genuine affection built over 2 years of shared struggle and success. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't know if what I feel for you is love in the traditional sense, but it's real, it's solid, and it's not going anywhere. Good, because neither am I. They stood there together while the celebration continued around them, two people who'd found each other not through romance, but through honest recognition of mutual need. Two people who'd built something real and lasting out of rejection and necessity. Evelyn thought about the woman she'd been standing on that platform, invisible, desperate, convinced her life was over at 31. That woman would be stunned by who she'd become, by the empire she'd helped build, by the respect she'd earned, by the partnership she'd forged with a man who valued her for exactly who she was. She'd been rejected 7 times before finding her place. 7 times told she wasn't enough. Turns out she'd just been waiting for the right person to see her clearly, someone who needed exactly what she had to offer, someone strong enough to appreciate strength in a partner rather than fear it. And that had made all the difference, because she was never unwanted. She was just waiting to be seen by someone who recognized that what the world called flaws were actually the exact qualities needed to build something extraordinary. The ranch spread before her in the fading light, thousands of acres of land she helped manage, dozens of people who respected her, a school full of children she was educating, a community she'd helped strengthen. All of it built on the foundation of one man looking past every younger, prettier option and choosing the woman everyone else had rejected. The woman who turned out to be exactly what he needed, exactly what this place needed, exactly what she'd needed to become herself. Evelyn Hart had spent years being invisible, being overlooked, being told she wasn't enough. Now standing beside her husband on land they'd built together, she was finally, completely, undeniably seen. And she was unstoppable.